Yes, we can. Let's... Sam Asefa?
Oops, here.
Secretary Jared Blumenfeld?
Present.
Secretary Castro Ramirez?
Here.
Alyssa Knove on behalf of David Kim, Cal State Transportation Agency.
Present.
Public Member Nicole Kapritz.
Here.
Public Member Mike Flagg.
Here.
Secretary Karen Ross.
Present.
Public Member Chancellor Juan Sanchez Munoz.
Here.
Secretary Mark Starr on behalf of Dr. Mark Galley.
Here.
That is a quorum.
All right.
Thank you, Chair.
Emily, are we doing housekeeping?
We are, yeah. Thank you so much, Mike. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone for joining us today online or by phone through the Zoom webinar platform or by tuning in on YouTube where the meeting is live streaming. My name is Emily Breslin. I'm the Comms and External Affairs Deputy Director for Strategic Growth Council, and I'm here to provide some information to help guide us through the processes for remote meeting, which have been designed with the intention to maximize access by members of the public. For those joining the webinar online via Zoom or by phone, please note that your microphone is automatically muted when you join. In order to minimize the risk of background noise, you will not be able to unmute yourself. For those joining online via Zoom, please note that the webinar platform doesn't enable video for attendees, so we will not be able to see you. If you do need technical assistance during the meeting or have a question about the meeting process, there are a few ways to get in touch with us. If you're using the online Zoom webinar, the best way is to use the Q&A function, which several members of the SGC team monitoring in the background. And if you've joined by phone and you have access to email, you can go ahead and email us at sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. If you do not have access to email, you may text or call us at 916-634-3359. If you do plan to make public comment, you must be joining the meeting via Zoom, either through the webinar or by phone. To make a public comment, please visit sgc.ca.gov/meetings and complete the meeting comment form linked there. You'll need to complete separate forms for each item on which you wish to speak. You may complete a form at any time during the meeting. When Chair Key opens the public comment period for your item, we will read the names of everyone who has submitted a form for that item. When you hear your name in that list, please raise your hand. To do this online in the Zoom webinar, click Raise Hand under the Participants menu, and you can find that at the bottom of your screen. To raise your hand by phone, press *9. And just note, I will be going through these instructions per agenda item in case you're not following in this go around. When it's your turn to speak, a member of the public will unmute your microphone. If you are online, you will see a window pop up alerting you that the host is unmuting you. You will need to click the option to approve unmute. And then after that, you can begin your comment. If you're on the phone, you will hear a recorded message alerting you that your line is unmuted. Please begin your comment after you hear the recorded message. Each speaker will have a maximum of 2 minutes to make their remarks. If you're online, you'll see a timer pop up on your screen. Please monitor that so you can wrap up your remarks accordingly. Whether you're online or on phone, you will be notified when your time is up. After that, we will mute your microphone. You do not need to take any additional action once your microphone is muted. And if you're unable to complete the online form, again, but would like to make a public comment, please email sgc.info@sgc.ca.gov. And lastly, members of the council, a housekeeping note for you. To notify the chair that you'd like to enter the discussion, please simply use the raise hand function in Zoom, and we will call on you in turn. After you speak, please click the button to lower your hand and make sure to mute yourself. And that's it. Thanks so much all for your participation. I will hand it back to the chair.
Thank you, Emily. So again, just at the front end, thank you to the members of the public that are taking the time. We really do want to hear from you. It may sound like we don't because we're going through all that procedural stuff at the front end, but we really, really do. And Emily will guide you through all of the procedures. So thank you for taking the time to participate in the meeting today. So we're on to item number 3, which is approval of the minutes from our September 8th meeting. Members that were not in attendance can still vote and may abstain. Do we have any public comment, Emily, on the approval of the minutes?
We do not.
All right. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes, Jared.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Can we get a roll call?
Yes. Director Acefa,
Abstain.
Secretary Blumenfeld,
Approve.
Nicole Capritz,
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez,
Yes.
Deputy Director Starr,
Yes.
Mike Flad,
Yes.
Alyssa Canove,
Abstain.
Secretary Ross,
Approve.
Chancellor Munoz.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Thank you very much. On to item number 4, which I'm very, very excited about, which is the election of new officers. The thought process here is that what I'd like to do is take nominations for chair and vice chair, and then take nomination for take nomination and second for chair, nomination and second for vice chair. Then we'll vote on them as a slate. Is everybody okay with that procedurally? Any concerns? Good, I'm not seeing any. So with that, I would like to look for a motion for chair.
Oh. Sorry, I forgot where my hand thing is.
Oh, okay.
I like to nominate a chair.
Thanks, Nicole.
I got to know Sam during the interview process for this job, and I've had the pleasure of working with him since, and I think he'd be the perfect steady hand at the helm, and I'm really impressed by his expertise and experience and wisdom, and so I'd like to nominate Sam Acefa.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
I'd like to second.
Thank you, Secretary Blumenfeld. So we have a motion and a second for chair. And for vice chair, I'd like to, if there's such a thing as privilege of a vice chair, acting chair, I'd like to take advantage of that and nominate Karen Ross to be the next vice chair. Oh, and I should have said early on that we elect or appoint a chair and vice chair every 2 years. That's in accordance with the Public Resources Code, section 75122. Matt loves it when we add code sections. And I met Karen when I was first appointed to the Strategic Growth Council, and we couldn't ask for someone that has more tenure and someone that is more inclusive than Karen Ross. Really appreciate the mentorship of myself, and I know as we seem to always be in transition, Karen is the perfect person to assist Sam and Lynn and all of us as this organization continues to grow and continuously improve. So with that, I will like to nominate Karen Ross for vice chair. Do I have a second?
Yeah, I enthusiastically second that nomination.
Great. So we have a motion and a second. Can I get well, let's take public comment. Is there any public comment on this item before we vote?
There is not, no.
Okay, thank you. So we have two motions, 2 seconds for this slate of Sam Asifa and Karen Ross to be the new chair and vice chair of the Strategic Growth Council. Can we get a roll call vote?
And I might suggest if we want to take one roll call vote, maybe have someone amend the motion to be for Sam as chair and Karen as vice chair. It's pedantic and I'm sorry, but if we can just wrap it up into one motion, then we can take one vote.
Okay, I can amend the motion to say exactly that.
Oh, okay, great. Does that cover us, Matt?
That should do it. Thank you very much, Nicole. Okay. I will take a roll call. Director Asifa.
Well, now I can't abstain from voting for myself and then voting. Yes.
Secretary Blumenfeld.
Yes.
Nicole Capritz.
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Yes.
Deputy Director Starr.
Yes.
Mike Flatt.
Yes.
Alyssa Knove.
Yes.
Secretary Ross.
Yes.
And Chancellor Munoz.
Aye.
Motion passes.
If there's some type of gavel to hand to you, Sam, I would do it virtually. You're on my right, so I can.
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I take this with humility. I am very delighted to be part of this group, but I'm going to take advantage of this and just say a few words. It was with great enthusiasm and humility when I at first accepted the director position for the Office of Planning and Research about 6 weeks ago. And I would say it's with the same enthusiasm that I accept the role of SGC chair, but also most importantly to join this body at this very important time in California's history. So I want to express my heartfelt thank you to Governor Newsom first for appointing me as OPR director, and then this group and fellow council members, not only for joining you today, but all through the interview process before that and after. You've been a number of them, almost all of you have been counsel to me, and as I was trying to make a decision, but also since I joined here. And I just want to say thank you for that, for your confidence as well. I'm very thrilled to join, not only because of the position, but very specifically because of this really pivotal time in California's history. I'll come back to that, why I think it is a pivotal time, but let me just briefly, for those who don't know me, and especially the public who are watching this, just briefly about myself. I was born and raised in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and left at age 17 as a refugee to live first in Kenya, then Italy, before immigrating to the United States in the early 80s. Since I was a child, I had a passion about the built environment, and I wanted to pursue architecture in my professional career, which I did once I immigrated to the US, and eventually evolved to studying city planning. And for the last several decades, my work has primarily revolved around the intersection between land use, climate, equity, and improving the lives and livelihoods of communities across many parts of America. I have lived and worked in about 8 cities, 4 countries, 3 continents. And now I'm very glad to call Sacramento home. And I once lived in San Francisco for about 11 years. So this is not a foreign place to me. California has been a very important part of my both professional career, but also personal career as well. So let me come back to what I meant by it is a pivotal time. First, California, and for that matter, the world, are experiencing some of the ravaging and devastating impacts of climate change now on a daily basis. We see it out our windows here. And I'm in Seattle, Washington currently, and we've been experiencing fire and smoke not as much as California, but this whole region has been experiencing it on a daily basis. So it's not a matter of whether there's climate change or not. We know, and communities know on a daily basis, that they are experiencing the impact of that. Office of Planning and Research and the Strategic Growth Council, I think, have critical roles and responsibilities to ensure that the governor, the legislatures, and California communities are well informed, are equipped with the best research, data, policies, and programs for mitigation, adaptation, and resilience of climate issues. Second, we are also in the midst of a once-in-a-generation pandemic, and hopefully we'll be coming out of it soon. That it has caused staggering loss of life, as we know, and economic devastation as well. And from where I sit in terms of policies that are important to me, this pandemic has also disproportionately, as we know, impacted low-income families, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities across California and across the nation. So our agencies, and especially the ones that are sitting here and represented here, as well as community groups, have critical roles to play in making sure that our policies and programs that we advance and implement prioritize communities that are most impacted by the pandemic as we focus on recovery. Third, and I think most importantly, I believe OPR and the Strategic Growth Council are in an incredibly opportune time for crafting and implementing bold and effective solutions to address some of the challenges and intractable challenges of climate equity and affordability at this time. I say that because we have the resources, we have the leadership, and the commitment by most of you here to actually be bold, especially at this time as we transition from the pandemic. I know I have talked to a lot of people in this work, and this time people really eager to get back to normal before COVID. In all of my work in focusing around climate, equity, land use issues, this is the first time that I really, since past the pandemic, that I realized that what was before was not really normal. So going back to normal to me means doing the same thing over again that has, in some ways, has gotten us here from some of the issues that I talked about. So this is an incredible opportunity to be really bold and really rethink how we craft policies and implement programs to address the most intractable challenges. And the state of California has been leading, and most of you in this room have been leading in these areas for many decades. But this time and the place we're in, I think gives us an incredible opportunity to do that. So I look forward to working with you on those issues. And I've heard, since I've joined the city, the state, I've also heard from community groups. I was just in Monterey last week for the Economic Summit. You hear it from communities on the ground, what issues and challenges that they're facing. So I am incredibly, again, humbled, and I take this position with humility, but most importantly, I really look forward to working with you at this incredible time with incredible opportunities that we have. So again, thank you. Now, I don't want to waste too much time here. I will just jump on to a packed agenda that we have today. So with that, I would now like to introduce Executive Director Lynn Van Kock for item number 5, which is the Executive Director's Report. Lynn?
Thank you, Director. And if I could just, for just 1 second, pivot back to Dr. Starr. I believe he has something to share with the group, and then I'll start my report.
And I think I'll just lower my hand before I forget. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Sam. I want to take a few minutes on behalf of the entire council to really extend a very warm welcome to you as the new director of OPR and now, of course, chair of the Strategic Growth Council. We really appreciate what comments you just brought and said to us, what you bring to this role. The service that you've been doing in Seattle is something that we in our programs have also leveraged and used adapted some of the equity focused tools you've developed there. We've adapted those here. And just the focus on ensuring that urban planning investments benefit all diverse neighborhoods and address underlying inequities that disproportionately impact and displace people of color, immigrant populations, and others. So really just appreciate that you champion racial equity and social justice and bring that to us. As you noted yourself, you've worked in 8 cities, 4 countries, and 3 continents, and had many leadership roles in planning and development. And so I can certainly speak for my agency and for others on the council and my department that we're just thrilled to hear the extensive experience that you bring to this role about land use plan decisions, how they impact race and health equity, and of course the existential crisis of climate change, as you noted. So again, on behalf of all the council members, welcome to California, and we look forward to learning with and from you as we work forward on all these very difficult issues.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, council members. So really appreciate that. As I introduced to Lynn, I just want to add one more thing because there is a leadership change at OPR and SGC, and I'm incredibly been honored to actually, for the last couple of months, to work with Lynn. This is a great opportunity for both of us and for all of us to really take advantage of this time to, again, shift and pivot in the way we work and the policies we address. And I very much look forward to working with her within SGC as well. So with that, I will ask Lynn to present the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Director Asefa. And congratulations on your appointment to chair, and Secretary Ross, congratulations as well to your nomination as vice chair. I am looking forward to working with both of you immensely. And Mike Flatt, I just want to take a moment to thank you for all that you've done in your role of vice chair and also in as acting chair during this transition time. We have really enjoyed working with you in that capacity and appreciate all that you've done for the council. So we do have a very full agenda today, so I will move quickly through the executive director's report so we can make sure that we have plenty of time to be able to cover our key discussion topics. So I will just start first with some updates on staffing at the Strategic Growth Council. And next slide, please. So it is just really important to share that our former Chief Deputy Jessie Buendia is off and running as the National Director of the Green for All campaign. We are so proud of her and excited for what she will do in this new space. We're also excited to welcome 2 new team members. We have Emily Breslin, who is the new Deputy Director of Communications and External Affairs, and also Jasmine Garcia Delgado, who is our Health and Equity Program Manager. I'm also really pleased to announce that Kiran Kumar, who's been formerly the program manager for the Community Assistance for Climate Equity program, has been promoted, and he's now serving as the Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformation. And next slide. And following with his promotion within the Community Assistance for Climate Equity, Ina Lupin has now been promoted as program manager, Coral Abbott as the senior program analyst, and Sarah Risher as the program analyst. We also have Alex Gallo, who has been working within the Transformative Climate Communities program, coming over as the Health and Equity Program Analyst, and Nicole Hernandez, who transitioned from the California Council on Science and Technology Science Policy Fellow, is now with us as the Climate Change Research Program Analyst. So a wonderful momentum within our organization, and so proud of the team for continuing to make such incredible impact in their roles, and wishing them a lot of luck in their new roles. We're also excited to welcome, starting yesterday, we have 2 executive fellows who will join us for the next 10 months, Kim Davia and Morikat Yu. Okay, next slide. Now, our annual report was just published today, so we'll make sure that everybody has a copy of that, and then it's available very prominently on our website. And so given that we are just putting out such a robust detail of all the work that the teams have been doing over the last year, I'm just going to focus on 3 key program highlights today. So the first is the Better Neighborhoods, Same Neighborhoods in East Oakland. This is a Transformative Climate Communities Program, round 3 implementation grant. And very exciting, they broke ground on the affordable housing development that's located on 95th and International in Deep East Oakland on September 20th of this year. As you can see from the picture, I was invited to come for the groundbreaking, and it was great to meet with the community members who had really led this project. One of the key things about this project is that it is 55 affordable units, as well as a non-for-profit health clinic that's on the ground floor. And one of the reasons that we just wanted to flag this program in particular is that it's such a great example of what can come from a community-driven design process. Next slide, please. Today, I'm also very happy to share with you that the Community Assistance for Climate Equity program, in partnership with the Institute for Local Government, has launched the second round of the BOOST program. BOOST is exciting. This is a program that provides customized capacity building support for cities to help them transform their approach to address and fund climate activities. And today we are going to welcome the cities of Barstow, La Puente, Maywood, McFarland, Needles, Rialto, and South San Francisco to the program. Next slide. We also are at the tail end of round 7 for the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Program. And in this round, we received 20 applications for easements and 5 applications for planning projects. During our consent calendar item today, we will ask for a vote on the staff's recommendation, which is awarding just under $66 million for 19 easement projects and 3 planning grants. Now, the picture on your left is in Humboldt, and through this program, we would protect over 6,000 acres of grazing and timber forest property that includes many miles of streams. And this protection will help maintain water quality and the health of the watershed. And on the right is a project in Tehama that protects 591 acres, including orchards and vineyards. It's also home to the Trappist Monastery, which operates a winery and retreat center on site. And they have committed to providing public access and open space in a low-income community. Okay, next slide. Very quickly in the legislative space, we had 5 bills in this legislative cycle that impact the Strategic Growth Council. AB 680 adds labor and workforce requirement to continuously appropriate climate change investment programs, and this will begin in July of 2025. This will have an impact on the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program, but not on the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation program. AB 1095 clarifies that AHSC can fund rental and owner-occupied housing, and this is a requirement that we already have built into the program. So you won't see too many changes in our guidelines around this bill. Next slide, please. SB 1 establishes the California Sea Level Rise State and Regional Support Collaborative, which will allocate up to $100 million for planning updates. And SGC will be part of the group that joins this collaborative and reviews these allocations. Okay, next slide. AB 361 extends the Bagley-Keene exemption to allow for remote public meetings. And this is the bill that's allowed us to be meeting remotely today, as well as in the January council meeting. And finally, AB 1291 allows commenters at open meetings to use translating technology to have twice the time allocated. Okay, now I'm going to switch gears and just move into this new structure that we are introducing today called Council Priorities. So over the first 2 months on the job, I've had the opportunity to meet with council members, stakeholders, members of the community, and really think about how we can meet the moment that was brought up by the director today about and lift up and share the solutions that have been piloted with the SGC and its partners. So today we're introducing a new strategy called Council Priorities. And this is to take a limited number of initiatives each year that will help focus the council for adopting and moving across initiatives as a whole council. So next slide. So a council priority really are areas of pressing and critical policy importance. They align with the governor's office priorities, they have high impact when scaled and replicated, and they fall within the policy area mandates of our formations statute. They also will benefit from the unique cabinet level interagency structure of the Strategic Growth Council, and they stem from demonstrated solutions, research, and innovation that's trialed within SGC programs or council member agency portfolios. As mentioned earlier, we want to just bring a couple of these each year to the council, and we'll also be asking for council members to volunteer to serve as council champions to really help us be able to move these initiatives and deliver on what the initiative is setting out to do. So today I'm excited because we are bringing Council Priority 1 to the council for adoption. This will be the next agenda item, and it is related to the Racial Equity Resource Hub. And then in February, we are planning to bring Council Priority 2, which is around technical assistance and community capacity building, to the council for a discussion. And with that, I thank you for your time, and I'd like to hand back over to Chairman Maseko.
Thank you so much, Director Cook, Von Cook. This is, I've been learning a lot about all the work that's been going on, but every time I see it, I'm just really blown away in terms of not only what SGC does, but I think the changes that are coming. And I really appreciate Von Cook's work on this, especially framing how this council priorities around policies will be structured. So I'm really excited about that. Before I open it up for council comments as well, I just want to also, I forgot to say congratulations to Secretary Ross as well. I really look forward to you working with you in this. And then thank you to Councilmember Flood as well for leading this group to date. So with that, for 10 minutes, I would open it up for council discussion on the executive director's presentation. Don't forget to use the raise hand option if you want to speak, or jump in at any time as well.
Well, Sam, I might just offer a few observations. I first of all, congratulations to you and Secretary Ross and our colleague Mike and his service in this interim role. I want to congratulate Lynn and her staff in this sort of repositioning of how we prosecute the work of the SGC and how we provide areas of foci with different council members, particularly involved in specific areas, and it provides us the capacity of the agency and all of the other agencies that it touches in different ways, programmatically, professionally, what have you, provides a tremendous opportunity, as you rightfully observed, Sam, to serve as a real catalyst across a much larger swath of agencies, departments, professionals, etc. And particularly in the next item having to do with racial equity, inclusion, diversity, etc. So I just want to, as I'm sure others will, recognize Lynn's vision and those that of her staff and colleagues in a very short period of time.
Thank you very much, Chancellor Munoz, for those kind words. Next, Council Member Starr, Deputy Secretary Starr. Sorry.
We can just make up titles as we go.
Oh, did I make that up?
I don't know if now is the time for this or in the next agenda item, but I'd certainly be willing to be one of the leads champions for the priority number 1, the racial equity priority, and can provide some comments from our agency's perspective about why we think that's so important and why we would like to be engaged with that priority to basically develop the racial equity resource hub. So was this appropriate time for that, or?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so I certainly volunteer for that. Hopefully, there's others that wish to join to be lead or champion for this priority, and appreciate the approach that that Lynn has taken in setting these priorities for the council and helping us to focus our efforts as we go forward and more effectively, hopefully. The governor certainly has, from the governor on down, has called for a California for All approach, including prioritizing equity. And our Health and Human Services Secretary Dr. Galley has taken that up as well and has released new guiding principles for our agency to lead with a vision for, and I'll quote here, for a healthy California for all, where equity is not just a word or concept, but the core value, where we constantly pursue social and racial justice by not only lifting all boats, but especially those boats that need to be lifted more. And I think that's a key concept. And Secretary has challenged us to transform our work to actively combat inequities and racism. And of course, our climate change group in public health, because the public health impacts of the climate crisis are exacerbated by inequities and structural racism, we use a racial equity lens in our climate change work and recognize that it's important to explicitly name and address inequities based on racism to improve resilience and reduce the health impacts of climate change. So I guess the last thing that I'll mention is our agency has recently created a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion group. And the order of those words is important because the acronym is JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion. So we can all remember that. We've also named chief equity officers for each department, and we'll soon have a Cal HHS, as we're now known, chief equity officer for our agency. And of course, we've had major budget investments in language access and equity data dashboard and JEDI training for our staff. So we look forward to contributing to development of this racial equity resource hub and gathering information from our partner agencies and helping to disseminate and operationalize that.
That's great. Thank you so much, Deputy Director Starr. And I think public health has been the forefront of actually experiencing the devastating impact of COVID, especially on people of color. So thank you for that. Secretary Blumfeld.
Appreciate the opportunity. First of all, just a big thanks, Sam, to you and Karen for taking on the leadership role. Really appreciate what both of you have offered, will offer. For me, if we didn't have the Strategic Growth Council, we'd have to create it. It's really, the intersectionality between all the issues, the high level focus that we have. And I think under both of your leadership, really, one, elevating the prominence of SGC. I just came back from the Conference of the Parties with Karen and others in Glasgow. And I think people are realizing way too late that climate change has to be dealt with in an integrated way. If you're not dealing with inequity, if you're not dealing with housing and VMT and all the issues that we deal with, education through healthcare, you're not going to get the solutions that we need. I've always felt on this body that it's been too humble in some ways. We need to get our message out there onto the global and national stage about what SGC does, which brings me to the second comment, which is really to thank Lynn for taking the reins. I've been asking for the first part of our name is strategic. We have not, until you came, had a strategic plan. And so prioritizing 3 elements each year that we can all take ownership over, I think, is a really brilliant strategy to get us to being a Strategic Growth Council, understanding that. And then finally, something I mentioned to Lynn, as we start coming back to work, really how we can go out as members of this council to go and see the projects that we have funded, I think is going to be a really important development. When I had the opportunity prior to COVID to go to some of those site visits, you learn an incredible amount about the power that SGC has in community, which is where we need to have the greatest impact. So I'm excited, willing to help. It looks like Lynn and Sam, you've got a great team from Lynn's director's report of folks that are eager and willing and able to take on this challenge. But let all of us know, I think kind of distributing the tasks amongst all of us as council members is going to be key to our collective success. If it's all done just by SGC staff, then you don't have the ownership that we all need to bring to this effort. So excited to be part of the team.
Thank you so much, Secretary Bloomfield, for that really great comments. I do agree with you. I think we need not only do the work, but we need to communicate, and we need to communicate what we're doing in a way that is really accessible to many. And we need to, and the role of the SGC council, the council members, it's our role. And I think the way Lynn structured it now is that we are also the spokespeople for the work that we do. I think we need to collectively work on our messaging and how we communicate. I think we need to really bring it down to a human level and talk about how the work that we do impacts and affects individuals in such a diverse state, because every place has its own nuances. So I think I look forward to working with council members in terms of how we become spokespeople for the work that needs to be done, the work that we're doing, and connect the dots in terms of the interconnectedness of climate change and all of these challenges that we face. But thank you for that comment. Any other council members?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, first of all, congratulations to you and congratulations to Secretary Ross. Just very briefly, I will say that I very much appreciate the process that Lynn led to arrive at these three priorities, a process that is, very much was very much grounded in conversation with each of us and with a number of other stakeholders. And I think that the top three priorities are very much aligned to the work that we're doing across agencies and departments. One is, of course, doubling down on our commitment to racial equity. Second is continuing to work in partnership with local communities to build capacity, to provide technical assistance, and to also learn from what is happening on the ground to help inform our policymaking and program development. And of course, as the agency that is helping to coordinate and lead a number of investments in the housing space, I very much appreciate that the third priority is beginning to really lean in terms of the connection between housing investments, climate, equity, and opportunity. So just wanted to sort of acknowledge that I'm very excited and looking forward to getting much more engaged as we focus our energies on these three priorities. So thank you, Lynn, for your leadership.
Thank you, Secretary Castro Ramirez, for your comments as well. Anyone else? I know we're coming up to 10 minutes. Seeing none, we'll now take public comments on this item.
I just want to acknowledge Secretary Ross. Did you have your hand up? I just wanted to note that.
Sorry, I did not.
Yes, I did, but for brevity, I will pass other than to say thank you, Sam, thank you, Lynn, thank you so much, Mike. Look forward to working with you in this new capacity. And just, ditto to the comments that have been made, especially Jared, you're right. If we didn't have the Strategic Growth Council, we would have to invent it. Fortunately for us, we do have it. And I just want to say that I am very excited, and I don't want Mark Starr to be the only one out there claiming a priority. I've been known as a cheerleader my whole life, and I want to be a champion for technical assistance and capacity building, because I can think of no better long-term difference we can make than really investing in our communities to be able to do this kind of work long after we've served on this Strategic Growth Council. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Secretary Ross. That great comment. I will now go to public comments.
Great, and for this agenda item, we do not have any public comment.
Great. So we're now moving on to item 6, which is an action item. I would like to invite Executive Director Von Cook again and Kiran Kumar to present item 6.
Thank you, Director. And so, really, really excited to bring forward this first council priority. So as everybody remembers, of course, last year, this body adopted the racial equity resolution. And 2 months ago, it was the second day that I was on the job. The council members then shared progress back around what their agencies and departments had been doing to be able to make progress towards this resolution. And at that time, there was a really clear vocalization from the council about the need to share and be able to lift up and be able the work that is being done, both to state partners and the non-state partners alike. And so based on that conversation, our team went back and developed the concept of the Racial Equity Resource Hub, which Kiran Kumar will describe. And very excited to have our first volunteer as a council champion, and also invite other members after Kiran's discussion to also weigh in on championship for the Council Priority 1. So Kiran, over to you.
Thanks, Lynn. And then Lois, if we could get the next slide, please. Good afternoon, Chair Acefa. Congratulations and members of the council. My name is Kiran Kumar and I am SGC's Deputy Director of Equity and Government Transformation. Really appreciate the time today to talk through some of these next steps on our commitments to advancing racial equity. So in August last year, the SGC Council made an important public statement denouncing historical, institutional, and structural racism and called for the valuing of Black lives. And at that meeting, we took a historic step to formalize a resolution putting in motion tangible strategies to address racial inequity and respond to Governor Newsom's call to action to do both more and to do better. Next slide, please. So this action came not just as a one-off, but as part of an evolution of the Council's commitments to racial equity, including adopting SGC's Racial Equity Action Plan and making it an ongoing agenda item year over year. Next slide. The Council's resolution committed this body to a number of actions, which we've reported back on a handful of times, even this past year. Some of those items include hosting SGC Council meetings as a forum to discuss racial equity within state government and to convene a racial equity working group. These actions would lay the groundwork for future, more tangible efforts like what we're discussing here today. Next slide. And then taking just a quick detour, in addition to the work of this council that's informed by that 2020 resolution, it's really important to recognize that this work is happening as part of nationwide efforts to recognize the importance of addressing racism and equity at the highest levels of state government, with California often being looked to as a model, both California and this body, the Strategic Growth Council. Next slide. And then this last month, a number of state agencies and departments completed their participation in the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, or CORE. SGC serves as the state host for this program, and it's implemented by a number of partners, including the Public Health Institute and Race Forward. CORE represents really one of the most robust capacity building programs for meaningful government transformation in the entire nation. And then what we're really finding is coming out of this year's learning year are a dozen or so different state agencies and departments, and then close to 100 plus state employees across those agencies, really looking for resources and tools to support implementation of their own agency's racial equity commitments. Next slide. So over the past year, both at SGC Council meetings, as well as during the course of convening the Racial Equity Working Group, we have identified a need to consolidate well-vetted resources, tools, curricula, and templates that are being used across state government into one easily accessible location. At our council meeting back in September, council members Crowfoot and Blumenfeld both remarked on the importance of essentially curating best practices created both by and for practitioners in state government to advance this work and ensure consistency across agencies. And then also importantly, Councilmember Capret spoke to the importance of replicating SGC's Racial Equity Action Plan work at the local and regional level by standardizing and promoting concepts and best practices at the state level. And then finally, I wanted to direct your attention to a handful of public letters of support that we've received in the last couple of days on this item, including from the Public Health Institute and the cities of Oakland and Ontario, all really endorsing this idea and speaking to the importance of this, not just within state government, but within local and regional government and the efforts that are taking place there. And then so to kind of close on the need for this as a council priority, we're really seeing that today's action to develop this resource hub as being a direct response to these various calls to action. Next slide. So to carry this work forward, we felt it really important to actually formalize the work as part of implementing on the council's racial equity resolution. It also takes the leadership of the resolution one step further and actually directs staff to take concrete and time-bound actions around advancing racial equity. Next slide. And so next steps around this work are going to involve coordinating with SGC's own health and equity program team to staff this effort, and then coordinate closely with the council's racial equity working group and the health and all policies task force, which we're planning to be convening in the next couple of months, on identifying the right resources and methodology for promoting effective best practices. And then examples of existing resources include elements from the core training curriculum, templates that can be used in creating racial equity action plans, and then templates for things like workforce surveys and other tools that agencies are currently using to advance their efforts or are in the development of. And then as we do with all of our council level initiatives, both our grant programs and increasingly these council priorities, we would collect data and report back to the council on the efficacy as well as need for iteration on this tool. And then I think the last slide, Lois. Great. So to close, staff is recommending that the racial equity resolution adopted by the council in August 2020 be amended to include additional language that directs SGC to host an online resource hub of racial equity resources. So the action in front of you today is to amend the California Strategic Growth Council racial equity resolution. Thanks.
Really quickly, before we go to council discussion, we just want to make a quick reminder for folks who are interested in leaving a public comment. You can go ahead as indicated on the screen, go to sgc.ca.gov/meetings. Again, this is for any public comment you want to make per agenda item. Please do make sure to submit a separate form. We will be listing out names. We will then unmute your microphone. And then please just do adhere to the time limit, which is 2 minutes. And with that, I think I will pass it back to Chair Asafa.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily. So now we'll initiate council comments, if we can spend time on this. So this time I'll try to look for hands.
So do we just jump in, Sam, or?
Well, I just saw the hands. I guess Deputy Director Starr had his hands first, and then Chancellor Munoz, you will be next.
I was wondering if we could, I don't know, it'd be hard to put the slides back up, if we could go back to the wording that's suggested for the amendment. I think what staff is recommending is that we vote on that as an amendment to the racial equity resolution. Is that correct? And obviously discuss it.
I'm going to ask Executive Director Van Kock to elaborate.
That is correct. So the amended resolution language that we are recommending, actually, Lois, could you go back one second? There you go. Be it further resolved, in order to advance the council and member agencies' commitment to racial equity, the council may develop and maintain a public resource for state boards, agencies, departments, and offices, and other local and regional entities to access information about racial equity initiatives of different government agencies. So that's the language that we are recommending be added to the existing resolution.
So to kick off the discussion, I would move that we, the council, make that amendment.
Second.
Just procedurally, Matt, I'm going to look through Matt. Do we need to go through public comments before the motion, or can we do that now?
We have in the past taken public comment after the motion has been seconded, but before the vote. It should be taken before the vote, but the precise order before that is up to you, Chair.
Great. So now we have a motion and second already. Did I hear a second at all?
Yes, Sam, I seconded.
Okay. Great. So we'll continue on council comments. Chancellor Munoz had the hand up.
Well, just procedurally, we had a motion and a second. Do we need to go to public comment and then vote and then our whatever comments we might have related?
You could continue with council comment. You could take public comment at this point and then finish with council comment and then take the vote.
I would suggest we continue with the council comments, then go to the public, and then come back to vote.
Okay, wonderful. Well, my comments will be brief. First of all, I want to commend the staff for this recommendation to try to aggregate this diaspora of content and information that could be singularly accessible to any number of agencies. I think that this particular group, the core group and the breadth of agencies represented, provides just a remarkable intersegmental sort of opportunity for the SGC to provide some strategic guidance on this issue of racial equity and inclusion. So number one, number two, I'd like to volunteer to serve as one of the council champions, Kieran, if you'll have me. And then number three, I just want to mention, and I think one of the Secretary Bloomfield might have talked about better communicating the activities of the agency. Provost once said to me, "You don't have to blow your horn all the time, but you should keep the mouthpiece a little moist." And so I want to direct people's attention to a wonderful communication toolkit that Emily and her team has created for people's use in public in some social media clips. And it's just a very convenient tool case that I think many of us can use to help express and disseminate the important work of the Strategic Growth Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Munoz, and thank you for volunteering on this as well. Anyone else from the council members? Secretary Bloomfield.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate the comments of the other council members. And just this initiative, you know, I think when we talked about it last time, it was making sure that we're not reinventing the wheel, that we're moving the agenda forward, and what better place to do it than SGC. You know, the more that we can offer the tools that allow people to understand the pathways, I think the less excuses people have to not doing the difficult work. And that would be the only thing that I'd say. We're trying to make it as easy as possible to have difficult conversations, and make sure those difficult conversations lead to systemic change. And so when Lynn and I were talking yesterday about this, I mean, for me, this is a tool that helps us achieve a goal, and that goal is dismantling systemic racism in institutions. And they're not just tools in and of themselves, they're really strategic tools that help us on that particular mission. So I'm gonna, you know, resolutely support this amendment and this initiative, and anything I can do and the Cal EPA family can do to move this forward, we will.
Thank you, Secretary Bloomfield. I couldn't agree with you more. And when I said in the beginning of my remarks why the state is leading in all these issues, this is one example of what SGC has done. The work has been very thorough, very thoughtful, and an incredible tool to frame our discussion, but also our engagement as well. So I really commend staff's work on this from SGC. Do we have any other comments from council members? For some reason I don't see. Oh,
I see Elisa.
oh, sorry. That council member, is it Cano?
Yes, thank you so much, Chair Asefa. Thank you. On behalf of Secretary Kim, CalSTA would also like to volunteer to participate in this effort. And so we look forward to working with the group to do that. Thank you.
Great, thanks. So now we will now take public comments on this item. I understand that we have received some letters on this item, and we'll ask that they be included in the record of this meeting. And Emily, do we have any current public comments? Anyone lined up to speak?
We do, yes. Yeah, and as Director Asefa, Chair Asefa mentioned, thank you to the cities of Ontario, Oakland, and the Public Health Institute for submitting their letters of support. So we're going to begin the public comment period by reading the names of everyone who signed up to comment on this item. Again, this is agenda item number 6. We currently have 5 people signed up to comment on the item. As a reminder, when you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. So I'm going to read those names out. So please do raise your hand. And you can do this by clicking raise hand under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform. Or if you're joining by phone, please press *9. Again, if you're joining by phone, please press *9. So go ahead and raise your hand. We've received comment cards from the following individuals: Sosan Madonna, Vince Lius, Weiyu Zhang, Elena Santa Maria, and Julia Kaplan. So again, you're going to have 2 minutes to make your public comment. If you're joining via the Zoom platform, you're going to be able to see the timer on your screen. Otherwise, we will notify you when your time is up. So please raise your hand if you have not yet done so. I will call your name and will unmute your microphone when it's time for you to speak. So we're now going to begin with public comment from Sosan Madonna from the Lighthouse Public Affairs on behalf of the Green Lining Institute. So Sosan, we're going to unmute you now. Go ahead and provide your public comment.
Great, thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone on the call. Really appreciate the opportunity to provide some comment today on this issue. My name is Sosan Madonna. I am speaking today on behalf of the Green Lining Institute, one of the co-sponsors of SB 17 from earlier this year. And the Green Lining Institute is committed to building a just economy that is inclusive, cooperative, sustainable, participatory, fair, and healthy. And we wanted to just provide comment today to say that we're supportive of this as a great first step in ensuring equity and addressing systemic racism at a broader level. And we really hope as an organization that this will lead to concrete support for communities of color and at-risk communities, and encourage additional agencies and lawmakers to participate in this process and engage in this critical issue in a more robust way that will lead to concrete changes. We see the need for a more holistic approach in addressing this, hence why Green Lining was part of the coalition on SB 17, and look forward to seeing how these changes will play out as we continue to move this important issue on racial equity resolutions and racial equity work at a broader level, broader and more holistic level moving forward. So thank you for the time to address the council today. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sosan. Next, we have Vince Lius from the Prevention Institute. Vince, please go ahead and raise your hand, remember, and we will go ahead and unmute you.
Hello. Hi, can you hear me?
We can, yeah, go ahead.
Hello, Chair and members. My name is Vince Lius, and I am a program coordinator with Prevention Institute. We are a national nonprofit headquartered in Oakland, working to realize health equity and racial justice through research, capacity building, community-centered grant making, and policy advocacy. We'd like to applaud the SGC's ongoing leadership with the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity, its racial equity resolution and working group, and now for taking this next step to create a resource hub to support peer exchange and facilitate consistent racial equity practices across agencies. We'd like to note that as new and future federal funding comes to California, we see great potential in the resource hub to serve local jurisdictions and state agencies as they consider building equitable funding programs to respond to the pressing issues facing our state that has been mentioned here in this meeting today, including facilitating a just recovery from the pandemic and creating a bold plan to combat climate change. We thank the Council for their ongoing leadership and express our enthusiasm in supporting and collaborating with you in these efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zeus, for your comment. Next, we'll go to Weiyu Zhang from the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network. Weiyu, if you'd like to raise your hand, we'll go ahead and unmute you.
Thank you. My name is Weiyu Zhang. I'm with the California Pan-Ethnic Health Network, CPAN. So thank you for the proposal to update the SGC's racial equity resolution. CPAN and our community partners are really excited. We were really excited to see the council pass the resolution last year, and now we're really pleased to see that the resolution is being put into action, including creating a resource hub of racial equity tools. Resources and tools are always helpful for agencies and departments to support peer exchange and to facilitate standardized and consistent racial equity practices across agencies. And so we believe that the SGC is very well positioned to host this hub, given its reach across agencies and its mandate to also promote public health and equity and support healthy and equitable communities. So we're also excited about the JEDA committee being created at the Health and Human Services Agency. And we hope to see these two bodies coordinate and collaborate further in the future. So CPAN has been leading the campaign on declaring racism as a public health crisis with our grassroots partners, which would acknowledge both the gravity and urgency of systemic racism and the impact it has on Black, Indigenous, and people of color. We've also supported SB 17, and we're further asking the state to really create a health equity and racial justice fund, which would give resources to community-based organizations to do racial equity work. But because we believe that racial equity, comprehensive racial equity reforms cannot be a top-down approach, and it needs resources in all sectors of our government, of our community-based organizations. So we really encourage that this SGC pursue further resources for this work and support, our racism as a Holocaust crisis, to really get the acknowledgement from the state leadership. And finally, we encourage the council to further think of meaningful ways to invite public scrutiny and strengthen public accountability, and really engage communities in meaningful, transparent, and authentic ways, especially the directly impacted communities. Thank you so much for the opportunity to make this comment.
Thank you so much, Weiyu. Next is Elena Santamaria from NextGen California. Elena, if you'd like to go ahead and raise your hand, we'll go ahead and unmute you.
Great, thank you so much. My name is Elena Santamaria with NextGen California. We are a nonprofit organization advocating through the legislature and programmatic work that state agencies handle. First and foremost, we want to thank the chair and the council members for this work and creating and amending the resolution to create a resource hub, one that is very much needed. However, in addition to Strategic Growth Council and the members that make up this council are 7 of hundreds of agencies that the state operates, agencies, task force, councils, and there's several layers to this work. So to do the transformative work that members of this council had highlighted earlier in this call regarding climate change and health and housing, there is a tremendous amount of work to be done. So creating this resource hub for other agencies to help guide this work is essential. There are additional ways to expedite this work to help support and complement the work of SGC. One of exactly this, of amending and growing the resolution to further provide resources to other agencies. In addition, there is a legislative vehicle, SB 17, which would declare racism a public health crisis while creating a statewide plan to head towards a path towards being anti-racist. There is a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done here, from government taking accountability in their role in their programmatic work, and also put ourselves on a path to make sure that we're anti-racist, so we decades later are not cleaning up or trying to address the systemic changes that prevent upward and economic mobility for everyone who calls California home. So we really appreciate the leadership of Strategic Growth Council and hope to continue this work in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that comment. If there was anyone who wasn't able to fill out a comment card and wishes to comment on this item, please raise your hand now. Otherwise, the next comment from Julia Kaplan from the Public Health Institute will be our last for this agenda item. Julia, if you'd like to raise your hand, we'll go ahead and unmute you now.
Great, thank you. I think that I'm unmuted now. My name is Julia Kaplan. I know several of you. I'm offering this comment on behalf of the Public Health Institute. And as Kieran mentioned in his presentation, we work closely with many of the council organizations on racial equity and health equity, including through the Capital Collaborative on Race and Equity. And we already submitted a letter in support of this, so I won't go repeat what's in the letter, but I wanted to add my appreciation for SGC's leadership in taking on the development and maintenance of this resource hub right now. And in particular, I feel this is significant because this is not mandated at this point. There are no new funds for this work, though we know they are sorely needed. And yet SGC is stepping to the plate to get this ball rolling now and not waiting for those processes to work through. We know that the need for this will be far greater than these first steps, but we're thrilled to see this get started. And I really want to honor the commitment and courage of all of you in SGC leadership in taking this on, and want you to know that we at the Public Health Institute are on board to support you. And finally, I also want to offer a very warm welcome to Director Acefa. We're thrilled about your appointment as Director of OPR, and I feel very fortunate to have you on board for all of us, for the state of California, and I look forward to meeting you and working with you. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, and thank you for all that participated. We need to hear from you, and I'm glad you're engaging. I know, just a reminder, we're running about 15 minutes late. So since we have a motion and a second, we will jump right to roll call vote.
Thank you, Chair. Director Acefa.
Yes.
Secretary Blumenfeld.
Yes.
Nicole Capritz.
Yes.
Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Yes.
Deputy Director Starr.
Yes.
Mike Flad.
Yes.
Undersecretary Alyssa Knof.
Yes.
Secretary Karen Ross.
Yes.
And Luana Putney on behalf of Chancellor Munoz.
I think Chancellor's still on. He's
Aye.
going to vote.
Aye.
My apologies. Thank you, Chancellor. It's unanimous. Motion passes.
Great. So we'll move to the next item, which is item number 7. This is a discussion item. I would like to invite again Executive Director Vaughn Koch, Deputy Director of Community Investment and Planning, Saharnas Mirzazad from SGC, and Commissioner Andrew McAllister from the California Energy Commission to present on this item.
Thank you, Chairman. So the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities, as everybody on this call knows, is just one of the flagship programs for the Strategic Growth Council. And for many years, it's been an incredibly important source of funding for affordable housing and transportation options near jobs and other key destinations. Now we're getting ready to move towards the 7th round of the AHFC program with the intention of having a notice of funding availability out in October of 2022. So today we want to take a moment to step back and ask the council to discuss some of the threshold questions about priorities and objectives that will really help us set the framework before we start the guideline process. So as everybody is very aware, HSC has a number of statutory requirements, but we think there are some really key areas where the council has some significant discretion that we would like to bring forward for discussion. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Saharnaz Mirzad to walk us through this conversation.
Thank you so much, Director. My name is Saharnaz Mirzad. I'm Deputy Director of Community Investment and Planning here at SGC. I'm here to present an item on HSC, Affordable Housing Sustainable Community Program Guidelines. As Lynn mentioned, we are considering changes to include 11 policy areas that are either required by statute, executive order, or priorities of the administration, or the program stakeholder had indicated that they're interested in these changes. These 11 policy areas, including geographic distribution, climate energy nexus, Fair Housing Act, homeownership, required per AB 1095, SGC racial equity plan, tribal access, conservation affordable housing nexus, workforce and labor requirement per AB 680, joint liability, master plan for aging requirements, and pro-housing requirements. From these policy areas, we are asking for the council to give us direction in 2 policy areas. In second policy area regarding climate and energy nexus, I'll be asking Commissioner McAllister from California Energy Commission to join us to report on findings of a joint work group focused on this topic. So the first question that we have for the council and we would like to seek your direction on it is that the current scoring mechanism for the HSC program prioritize funding for the projects that are likely to be constructed without HSC support. Should the HSC guidelines be modified to instead focus on catalyzing projects in locations that may not be produced projects without HSC support? The second topic that we're asking for direction from the council is that the current guidelines provide additional points for multiple green buildings investments, including additional points for projects that are all electric. While all electric buildings meet the goal of the lowering emission, they are not currently a common industry practice. Should the HSC program pioneer decarbonization efforts, or should it align with current standards and solutions? With that, I would like to hand it to Commissioner McAllister to report on the results of the work group that he is chairing, and then I'll come back with the discussion items to get your feedback. Thank you, Commissioner.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. So thanks, Saharnaz. I'll try to be brief. I have to say at the outset, I'm really inspired. I've been able to sit in on most of the meeting, and I just really want to congratulate you on the depth of your commitment and just the breadth of the actions that you're taking on. Really strategic is the key word that I've heard several times. So thank you. Also, congrats to Chair Director Asefa. Really great to have you on board, and also congrats to Director or Secretary / Vice Chair Ross. A lot of familiar faces here. Really appreciate the invitation. And I guess I also have to say congrats to Nicole Capritz, who will be the recipient. It's public knowledge, so I'm not letting any cat out of the bag here, but is going to receive CEC's Clean Energy Hall of Fame award. So congrats. That's a legacy of, or a result of decades and decades of incredible commitment. And results. Finally, I just want to set this up by saying that Lynn, when she was over at agency, was critical actually in getting this working group that I'm going to describe very, very briefly going. We sort of co-chaired the kickoffs, and it's been meeting about every 6 weeks or so for the last going on a year now. Now that Lynn has moved over to SGC, we have Sasha Kurgan, who I think I saw on the call, who's also now representing the agency. So we just have really incredible participation, and I'll list the rest of the members here in a second. So at the behest of the governor's office, we've been convening this housing and decarbonization working group, and it's consists of representatives or principals really from the Energy Commission, from the Public Utilities Commission, from the Air Resources Board, from SGC, obviously, from the California Housing Finance Agency, as well as the Department of Community Services and Development, And then also we have participation from the Building Standards Commission, who's kind of paying attention to some of the work that we're doing. And I want to just thank Secretary Castro Ramirez for your leadership. I think we're starting to kind of hit the phase where we're able to show some results. And that's what I want to talk about now. So high level, two of the biggest crises we have are housing and climate. So we have to build more housing. We have to also meet our sustainability and decarbonization goals. And so we're looking, one of the core sort of items that included in the charter of this working group is looking at how we can align those two goals and really produce win-wins. And, as Saharna said, pioneer the decarbonization. And we need to do that intentionally and thoughtfully. And so it has both a policy element and a technical element, which staff level is digging into the technical piece of it. So there's a lot of innovation going on, but yet it's not in terms of decarbonizing our new construction affordable housing, but it's not yet industry standard. But what we're finding is decarbonization, really in the form of all electric construction, can really carry a lot of water, both on the affordability side and on the decarbonization side. So this sort of task force, the working group within the larger working group that's focused on this, is really showing that there are a couple things we could do. One in particular, align the utility allowances, or clarify the way utility allowances feed the overall financing, or play into the overall financing of multifamily housing. So there's a tool there that we are going to update called the California Utility Allowance Calculator. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with that, but it's we at the Energy Commission are going to update that tool. We hope to do that by October. And the proposal is that, I think the fact is really that this tool will help the developer community get on board with electrification. It'll sort of demonstrate the value of that to the customer, and it'll to the resident rather, and it'll show the developer pathways to build more cheaply. And we've had some presentations at the working group that begin to sort of help people appreciate the possibilities there. I don't want to get into too many details, but I guess the proposal really for the next round of the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities program would possibly be to require the use of this tool, the Utility Allowance Calculator, to help to weave that into the overall package as part of maybe the point system, or in some way require that as part of the HSC. So the short story really is that there's a lot of technical work going on to sort of prove out the electric pathway for new construction of affordable housing. And this tool that I've mentioned is one way to help that happen, so that it aligns the incentives for the developer and for the resident of the building once it's constructed. With that, I think I'll stop and open for any questions.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Lois, can we have the PowerPoint back? This is a council discussion item, so there is no action requested. Staff would like to get high-level direction from the council on the approach and strategy for the next guidelines update. The two discussion questions are: what role should HSC play in leading innovation in new spaces? Should HSC guidelines be modified to instead focus on catalyzing projects in locations that may not be produced projects without HSC support? And should the HSC program pioneer decarbonization efforts or should it align with the current standards and solutions? With that, I will hand it over to the chair for the council discussion. And I believe that after the council discussion, we'll take some public comments on that. Thank you.
Yeah, just really quickly, again, just public comment process. Sorry to interject here. Again, please complete the form at sgc.ca.gov/meetings. Submit a form for each item per agenda item. Listen for your name. We'll go ahead and unmute your microphone, and please do adhere to the time limit, which is 2 minutes today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Emily. Now we'll initiate, and thanks, Commissioner McAllister, Saharnas, and Lynn as well. We'll initiate a council discussion. I would, if we could limit this discussion, I know this is very important, if we can limit it to 30 minutes, that would be great. Will keep us on time. But also if commissioners can provide specific kind of directions as they comment, that would be great. Thank you. So with that, I'll open it up and see Secretary Blumenfeld. You had your hand up.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Saharnas and Andrew in particular. I'll try and, so there's two questions that were teed up. The first one is about the current scoring mechanisms for AHSC that I just want to get some clarification on. So I guess the question there is whether AHSC should be funding projects that would be constructed without AHSC support. And that seems to me like maybe a different question than immediate versus longer term GHG reductions or geographic distribution. And I just think it's important that those two questions aren't conflated. So that's kind of the first issue. And then I think, you know, when we say that AHSC prioritizes funding for projects that, quote, have the highest immediate GHG potential, as I understand it, the projects are evaluated equally using the HSC benefits calculator tool, which quantifies the GHG reductions out of several decades. So it isn't immediate. And so I just want to make sure when we're talking about, especially with the criticality of kind of understanding short versus long-term GHG reductions, that we're being accurate about the time frame. And then, as you all know, but Sam, this Chair Asife, this will become more clear as time goes on. But this project is, the AHSC is directly funded by the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the cap and trade revenues. And so just from the position that I hold on the council, I just want to make sure that we're prioritizing achieving greenhouse gas reductions. And at this stage, I just wanted to signal that I wouldn't want to support any further weakening of the GHG component of the program, and really want to emphasize just prioritizing the best projects that demonstrate how they can advance the state's climate and equity goals. And obviously we need to achieve multiple goals at the same time instead of, I think it's kind of being misrepresented as kind of these big goals being in conflict, and asking the council to choose between achieving equity versus and other goals as distinct from achieving GHG reductions. And I would want us to encourage staff to find a way to balance those issues. With 30% of the score directed to GHG, that leaves 70% that can be utilized for consideration of other issues. So I guess one of the questions, Sam, to your point, is that if we think about funding projects that would likely be constructed even without AHSC support, can staff clarify what problem they're trying to address here? Is it a matter of not funding projects that have local funding? And if so, do we want to penalize jurisdictions that have voted to support housing? So I'd like to get some clarity on that underlying question. And then I had some questions that related to Commissioner McAllister, but I don't know if it's useful, Chair, to, given the time constraints, to have the answers now or to have the team respond, Saharnas and Lynn respond later. But either way, if you'd like me to continue, I can. If you'd like to open it back up to them, we can do that.
I think the questions there that you're asking are fundamental, and I think clarity is important. It would be helpful for everyone in the discussion. So I would ask Executive Director Von Cook to elaborate a bit on the specific questions, one, and then second, whether there is, does this pit one against the other? Is it like one or the other? GHG reduction goals versus equity, and Lynn, if you could address those two, I think it would be really helpful for the conversation.
Of course, and I'll comment kind of at a high level and then invite Saharnas to also to fill any details as well. So I think the spirit of this question was in no way intending to kind of pit policy ideas against each other, more along the lines of thinking through this kind of question around, do we want to use this program to help shape development patterns in areas that might not already have the existing infrastructure in place that would then lead to the GHG reduction impact that you might see in areas that already have the higher density, the transportation infrastructure built. We ask the question because we think about, do we want this program to be, and I think this is a good question around like long versus short term, but do we want it to be thinking about how do we catalyze in the development in patterns that we wouldn't necessarily see were it not for the HSC program. I do love the idea of thinking about how to find the pathway that is deconflicting and finding a way to achieve both goals. And I think that's one of the notes that I took down as well. But I think it's about really trying to thread the needle and think about like what do we want this program to be pushing towards versus being a kind of a 0-1 question as well. And Saharnas, did you have anything you wanted to comment on?
I think it was great, Lynn, and I totally agree with you, Secretary Bloomfield, that the core of this program is to make sure that we are coupling housing and transit together to make sure that we are reducing greenhouse gas emissions. We shouldn't really compromise on that in the spirit of the program in any way. But it's again more of a philosophical question that are we thinking this program to build projects where we have those infrastructure in place, or are we using this to shape the future land use development and like catalyze the things that we really want to see in areas that don't exist right now? And that's like, both of them are great. Both of them are really valuable goals to achieve. And I don't think that there is anything wrong about any of those, but we are seeking that council direction to know which would be a priority for the council. And CARB has been a great partner along the way for us to figure out, but there's always some limitations in how we can capture those GHG emissions because we cannot evaluate things that are not existing in a land use right now or infrastructure that doesn't exist, but we can catalyze for that to happen. And we should just again, think about that through that lens, if we want to go in that direction or not. But in any cases, I totally agree with you that the Secretary Bloomfield that reducing greenhouse gas emissions should be the goal and what's in the statute for this program, and we shouldn't compromise on it.
Cool.
Secretary Bloomfield, does that?
Yeah, that was super helpful. Appreciate it. And I think a further discussion, Sanas and team have been really good at kind of engaging, and so let's continue that discussion. And I think I was clear from my perspective where we should go. Super quickly, want to thank Commissioner McAllister. He's been a champion. If any of us had any doubts about the commitment of public service and the last building code update, just incredible to watch what Commissioner McAllister has been doing. And the next building code update is coming just around the corner. Just want to be clear that I strongly support going all electric. And I think it's important for AHSC to continue to pioneer decarbonization efforts in this area. And really a primary focus on requiring all electric buildings and thinking about how we can do that as quickly as possible. And just want to pick up one final thing and then turn it over to Councilmember Castro Ramirez and others. Just in terms of, Sahana, as you talked about this, just really want to make sure that we continue integrating the California Air Resources Board in their partnership with them as we think about regular communication and sharing of data and draft reports and those kind of technical matters, because I think CARB has a really valuable role to play, and as they often feel like sometimes that we come to them later in the process than would be beneficial. So it'd be really important to me that we continue, as in the past, to include the Air Resources Board in all these discussions. I think they can make sure that as we're doing this analysis, they can help us understand the bigger picture and crunch some of these numbers. So appreciate you doing that as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree as well. I think CARB's work, and also is there a way that we can continue to invest in high emission areas, but also explore how we quantify our quantification methods. But I would like staff to, consider those as well. Secretary Castro Ramirez, you've been waiting patiently.
No worries, Chair. This was actually it was good that I was waiting, because it gave me the opportunity to hear from Executive Director Van Liebert and her staff regarding just additional details, trying to get to input as the staff deliberate, right, on the round 7 of the ASIC program. First of all, I just want to also mention that I think it's great that the staff is taking a look at the 11 policy areas and really taking a step back, and doing so in the context of the significant investments, right, that the state is making in housing, with about $22 billion in this year's budget for housing affordability, and then of course also addressing homelessness comprehensively, both looking at ways to prevent and also ways to continue to partner with locals to end homelessness. So just want to again sort of acknowledge that this is the time to do it, and leading this stakeholder engagement process now is very important. I also think that the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program has been a really important program in aligning our housing and transportation investments while continuing to stay focused on reducing greenhouse gas numbers, and very much looking at the alignment of these investments. So the benefits have been both in urban areas and also in suburban and rural areas. So I'm having a difficult time, right, having to choose, because I think that there's a benefit to continuing to invest in, continuing to make this program available to areas where there is some level of investment, but the additional focus that brings the alignment is important, right? And there's much for us to be able to learn from how ASIC is implemented in urban areas versus how it's being implemented in suburban and rural areas. So my recommendation would be that as the staff continue to deliberate on this question, that maybe the approach should be one of looking at a menu of options for projects, so that we can continue to showcase innovation and proven strategies, while also focusing on investments where that focus needs to occur. So I would just say that I know this is tough, but I think that there's a benefit to continuing to do both. And then with regard to climate and of course, want to acknowledge Commissioner McAllister and his leadership, and also Lynn's leadership, and bringing together, right, a focus around housing and climate, and how we can continue to move, this agenda forward. Again, I also think that it is important for us to continue doing everything to push for decarbonization. But I think it's important to do so with a lens towards understanding the implication that may have in terms of the current production pipeline particularly in the affordable housing space. And I know that that's a very sort of dynamic conversation, so I don't have a solution or an answer, but I know that the working group is very much having that conversation and would just recommend that we look to the working group to come forward with a set of recommendations that can help inform how we prioritize this aspect as we move forward to the next round of funding.
Great, thank you for that thoughtful feedback. We have Councilmember Capretz has, you have your hand.
Well, first of all, great to see you, Commissioner McAllister. We spent years working together in San Diego for a clean energy future. And sorry, I'm getting over a cold, so I know my voice is like all weird, but so, and also thank you for the honor and the award. I'm pleased about it and enjoying what it means. But just so to jump in that question related to decarbonization, yes, I absolutely believe we should be a pioneer. I absolutely believe, I'm glad we're incentivizing and giving more points to electrification, but I think at the next building code, no pressure, Andrew. You need to move it to full requirement, and ideally it would be a requirement for AHSC. And I think it's really important for us to model like what electrification looks like and to get the contractors and the other players, used to this kind of construction. I'm unfamiliar with the challenges to the degree that were just highlighted. So I don't know all the nuances, but all I know is that the planet is melting and we have to stop burning fossil gas. So that's just sort of my lens, is like we're in a climate emergency and a public health emergency, and we have to sort of accelerate the path to zero carbon. And as far as the first question goes, yeah, I definitely see the nuances of this issue and that there's no easy answer. And so, threading the needle, finding the middle is fine. I will just say that as someone from San Diego, as Commissioner McAllister can attest, we've never really enjoyed the benefits of functional world-class transit or even transit-oriented development. And so for us, when we receive these awards, they're really game-changing because, again, we are demonstrating on the ground in usually the most deserving communities, like what a different quality of life could be and what urban infill could mean with functional transit. And so I think that geographic diversity in the state is really important, and that, yeah, we are behind in San Diego. I mean, we're making great strides. I'm sure everybody knows we're about to pass, a plan for world-class transit. We're going to do a citizens measure to help fund this kind of transformative transportation. But at the same time, we still have a long ways to go. And so I think San Diego has historically not received their fair share of these awards. And so I think, making sure that there's geographic diversity, not just in San Diego, that's just my lens and my experience, but throughout the state, I think it's important for us to invest in those communities and really show what it means, because there still is resistance and a lack of understanding. A lot of folks have just never seen in their own backyard what that kind of transit-oriented development could mean. So those are my two responses, but I'm so happy to see you, Commissioner McAllister, and eager to continue. I guess I'll try to work for another 5 years.
Great. Deputy Director Starr.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just kind of in response to the specific question that Deputy Director Mirzazad asked us. Yeah, I think from a Health and Human Services perspective, we would say yes, we would like to see catalyzing, using these awards to catalyze this in areas and communities with limited infrastructure, and echo some of the comments that fellow council members have made in that regard. It's very important, obviously, from a health equity perspective, which is where we're coming from, as far as geographic distribution and emissions reduction and equity can all be addressed simultaneously. So we think it's, I guess I would say, as we all know, the efforts to achieve health equity often require special attention to the needs of those at greatest risk of poor health and perhaps marginalized or historically oppressed communities. And we talked about that a little bit earlier in the context of the racial equity approach as well. But we think that you can simultaneously accomplish emissions reductions, greenhouse gas reductions, improve climate change, have the co-benefits for reducing health consequences of climate change, and strategies that reduce emissions and improve healthy living conditions for people facing inequities. So, we think it's compatible with the enabling statute because aspects such as air pollution and social, economic, environmental conditions are part of that, and including improving public health and other co-benefits. So that's kind of where we come in on this, is really focusing on the co-benefits, and think that we can prioritize both health equity benefits and greenhouse gas emissions reductions in this process. So thanks.
Great. Secretary Castro Ramirez, is that the old hand or new hand? Okay.
It's a new hand.
New hand, great. Please go ahead.
Yes, I had one more point. Thank you so much, Chair. And this is just a point related to one of the 11 policy areas was focused on fair housing. And again, very much appreciate, that the staff is looking at how we continue to implement and carry out the spirit of Assembly Bill 686, which sets a requirement that we, as a state, are committed to affirmatively furthering fair housing. And the law essentially is very broad, but it does mandate that all public entities with programs or activities that relate to housing or community development, that we must administer these programs in a way that addresses furthering fair housing, addressing historical patterns of racial segregation, and taking meaningful actions to foster inclusive communities. Our agency and the various departments, including HCD and College FA and Department of Real Estate, we're evaluating ourselves constantly to see how we're doing and measuring our progress in terms of the ability to be able to implement AFFH. And we recognize that this is also an area where further interagency collaboration and support is necessary and important. So we're very much ready to continue being part of the overall conversation when it comes to how do we incorporate AFFH in the work that we're doing, particularly within the ASIC program. I think that it is important, that by taking up this work of AFFH within the ASIC program, that we recognize that we have the opportunity and the mandate to lead on fair housing, to create greater access to opportunity, and to overcome these historical, unfortunately, historical sort of entrenched patterns of residential segregation. And so to accomplish the goals of AB 686, I would encourage that as we think about the program, the ASIC program, and how we're investing, that we adopt an approach that enables us to continue to invest in areas of high need or communities that have been historically suffered from disinvestment, but that we also continue to create opportunities. Specifically, I'm thinking as we look at affordable housing, that we look at opportunities to increase the supply of affordable housing in communities that are high resource communities. And I'll share with you that we're working in close partnership with the state Treasurer Ma, and the Comptroller's Office, our partners at the California Debt Limit Allocation Committee, to ensure that there is this balance in the way that bond financing is allocated. And in this first year of adopting AFFH as a priority, we are already seeing great progress in terms of the number of affordable housing developments that are moving into actually construction, right, to be able to rebalance the portfolio. So again, I think that this is another sort of demonstration of how we can embrace AFFH to both continue to invest in under-resourced areas and also create opportunities in high or highest opportunity areas. And I would just encourage the staff to look at the data from this year's SITLAC allocation and any additional data that may be available that is being collected either by HCD or this new federal administration under, of course, Biden-Harris has recommitted to AFFH, and I know that there's tremendous opportunity for us to find additional support and resources, right, when we look at the ASIC portfolio and how to strike the balance between creating housing in areas of high resources, but also not doing so at the expense of not investing in communities that have been that may not have the same level of infrastructure or that may not have had the same level of investment. Thank you.
Great, thanks. I have a couple of hands up. Commissioner McAllister, you had your hand up. Is that a question?
Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted a great conversation, and I just wanted to sort of make a few wrap-up comments. First of all, the goal of the overall working group, interagency working group on housing and decarbonization, is to take recommendations to the agencies across the administration and sort of align our policy directions on this. And so that's ongoing, but that is starting to take shape, and that's part of why I wanted to be here and why Saharna's asked me to be here. So, and I want to just highlight even further the signaling or the sort of innovation, the directional signaling, how critical it is for the ASHH program to sort of demonstrate innovation and begin to condition the marketplace, because people are paying attention. And when we daylight best practices, say it's electrification, all electric construction, and we bring in a couple of developers do that, and then everyone sees what they do, it's already happening, and they're showing success, and including even potentially reduced construction costs with all electric. And then we've talked about staging in the various programs across the state that finance housing, and you suggested this, Secretary Castro Ramirez, that starting with the AHSH, AHSC, sorry, starting with this program and then moving into the next tranche at HCD and then HFA, and then ultimately as learning takes place and as each program kind of opens up the path for the next to do better and to really have these best practices emerge, ultimately working with the treasurer and CIDLAC and TCAC down the road a little ways as well. So I think, Secretary, you also suggested that. So finally, I just wanted to say, the Energy Commission has a lot of technical chops in this area. Obviously, we own the building code, the energy part of the building code, working with ARB and others on the Cal Green, the part 11, the sustainability part of the building code. And we're here to help guide the conversation on these issues, and certainly sort of help evaluate the various options, and I think encourage this synergy that we're going to see between decarbonization and building more and better housing. And so I think that this is a can-do moment, and I think the signaling that the HSC program provides is just critical, hard to overstate.
Great, thanks. Councilmember Flood.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. And I'll be brief because I know we're running up against time too, but really appreciate this agenda item. I appreciate the sort of attempt to have competing values and have a discussion around prioritization of values that I guess in one way could look like they're conflicted or competing, but really it's just trying to set a strategic thought on which of these areas we prioritize more than others. So two quick comments, one on the geographic, the first question, the geographic distribution. I'm still conflicted on that. I think that I struggle to try to prioritize one of those over the other than I think tie goes to GHG reductions, and that should always be our fallback priority. That's my short answer on that one. On this, the second, I think absolutely we should be a pioneer on decarbonization, and we should, for all the reasons that have already been stated, make that a priority as well. I really appreciate the relook and the continuous focus on continuous improvement in these 11 focus areas. And I'm really excited to see the home ownership piece and trying to address the inequities, at least in competitiveness in a lot of grant programs, especially ours, on those that involve ownership. And I know there's other values that put that as at a disadvantage or create those inequities, but big believer in breaking that cycle of rental dependency, and we really need to help folks build equity and move beyond rental housing. And at the local level, that's what we're seeing is just a whole bunch of rental density and not a lot of ownership opportunities. And I think that's a key piece. And then the last piece I'll touch on is just in the conclusion, the focus on streamlining our process. And that's one of the most common complaints I hear, is that the process for AHSC is extremely burdensome. And I know in some respects it's by design to build collaborations and build a sense of coordination and cooperation in communities. The folks that have been awarded AHSC have often commented that the process itself was sort of transformative, like TCC. But so I think somehow we need to retain that piece where we're building collaborations within communities, but also work consistently on streamlining, which also speaks to our technical assistance grants and the needs for those. And I think we're doing the right things, but I would like to hear more, not necessarily now, but at some point, on how we're addressing streamlining of all of our processes and what specific tactical things have been done to try to make our process easier to navigate. That's it.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Fad. Secretary Castro Ramirez, another new hand, or no, the old hand? So I'll try to just wrap it up. And just my own comment and observation. This has been, for me, at a 50,000 foot level, there has been always this seemingly chasm between addressing equity and climate issues. In the bigger picture, they're intertwined. Addressing climate is an equity issue itself, but it comes up often when you start digging into very specific policies. And I think this highlighted for me, and geographic distribution, supporting areas that actually need support to become green and decarbonize or change their how they're developed, because they don't have it. I think we have a role to play there. But if it's not going to happen at the end, in the longer term, we're not going to get the reduction that we need as well. The time may be delayed. So there's on one hand, I think for me, it also highlights, because we're taking in these challenging issues head on, and this group, then the hard decisions come up and hard questions come up like this. Are we pitting one against another? And I've seen it in a number of other seemingly contradictory or competing policies. We want to preserve land for droughts or protect water, but we also want to maximize the land use with development. And so this highlights kind of an underlying issue and problem that it behooves us, if we don't find solutions to them, because we're going to have even bolder and bigger policies around housing and climate as we move forward here. So my sense is, I was conflicted when I first saw it. Again, to your point, Jared, this is primarily around reducing greenhouse gas, and then we should actually reward the ones that are reducing it the most. But within that, there is also this other tug of war for me, which is like, well, we need to also help the ones that are not getting there and without our support. So with my comments, I'm being sketchy a bit at a high level because I don't have the answers for it, but we have incredible staff who have been thinking about it for quite some time and posed this question. What I hear the direction from this council overall, especially on the first question, is keep working on it to first, deconflict the notion that these are kind of contradictory policy issues, but also find ways, I don't know if I like the word middle ground, as long as it doesn't reduce the end outcome, but some middle ground between the two in terms of how we frame these issues and how we address it. I know I mentioned we are looking, and CARB is looking at, potentially, how do we measure? Is there a way that we need to rethink the way we measure greenhouse gas reduction? But at the same time, I think it behooves us, if we're not going to invest in areas, even though they are high emission areas, those are the places that need the most transformation. So charge to staff is continue working on it, find the middle ground on the first question. On the second question, I generally see an agreement that this is something that should move forward in terms of being pioneering decarbonization. So unless I miss something, that is the direction to staff. Keep working and refining this. Again, incredible work that you have done, and thank you for actually dealing with the most challenging issues. If we don't deal with this now, we'll keep tripping on and other similar issues as well.
Really appreciate the feedback from the council. Definitely we'll keep working on it, and we'll keep all you posted about what comes next. And if anything else, please reach out to us and let us know. We are really looking forward from the policy direction from the council members and working with your agencies on these topics. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now we will take public comments on this item. Emily, do we have any?
Great, yeah.
Signed up?
Thank you, Chair Asafa. I'm going to begin the public comment period by reading the names of everyone who signed up to this comment. For agenda item number 6, we have 5 people signed up thus far. Again, as a reminder, when you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking raise hand under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you're joining us by phone. We've received comment cards from the following individuals: Lisa Madsen, Debbie Erikel, Nicole Nerori, Bill Higgins, and Richard Sadowski. You're going to have 2 minutes to make your comment. If you're joining via the Zoom platform, you'll be able to see the timer on your screen, which we're keeping to 2 minutes. Otherwise, we'll notify you when your time is up. Please raise your hand if you've not yet done so. I will call your name and we'll begin to unmute your microphone when it's time for you to speak. So with that, we will begin with public comment from Lisa Madsen from Sandag. Lisa, go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you. The San Diego Association of Governments, or SANDAG, thanks the Council for the thoughtful presentation and discussion, and generally supports the policy areas outlined for discussion. In particular, earlier this year, we came before the Council to applaud the proposed inclusion of a geographic distribution goal, ensuring that every region has the opportunity to partner with the state to provide much needed affordable housing and transportation. Additionally, SANDAG agrees with the Strategic Growth Council that the San Diego region, with its diverse and unique communities, needs, and geography, is considered as a standalone geographic area. Recent discussions in the San Diego region support similar climate energy nexus policy areas around decarbonization efforts. As mentioned previously, Commissioner McAllister, being from San Diego, I'm sure is familiar with our region's housing and climate challenges and opportunities. Equity and inclusion, as well as focusing on disadvantaged communities, continues to be a priority in the San Diego region. But to achieve our regional goals for housing and climate, we also support opportunities to further affordable housing in high resource communities and supporting land use changes that bring jobs and housing together. Home ownership is another area of importance in building new generational wealth for all Californians. SANDAG supports policy direction that evaluates supporting home ownership projects that contribute towards meeting the housing crisis and support climate action plan goals for our region. As SANDAG utilizes REAP funds, we look forward to regional collaboration and discussing priority policy areas for the San Diego region that hopefully align with the next round of AHSC guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next on our list, we have Debbie Arakel from Habitat for Humanity. Debbie, if you'd like to go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm Debbie Arakel, Executive Director with Habitat for Humanity California, our statewide coalition of Habitat affiliates, and we're dedicated to producing and sustaining affordable ownership housing and achieving racial and economic justice by increasing access to ownership. I'd like to sincerely thank the council and staff for your commitment to updating the guidelines and the scoring mechanism to ensure that affordable ownership developments are able to fairly compete for funding. Habitat is a ready and eager partner, and ownership housing is a critical component for merging the two goals of greenhouse gas reduction and equity. Habitat is actually building zero net energy ownership developments aligned with the program's goals. And we have more developments in the pipeline statewide, but we could do so much more with this support and partnership. There's a precedent for one ownership funded project. It was over 6 years ago, but East Bay Silicon Valley Habitat partnered with AHSC on a 30-unit home development in Fremont. Today, these 30 homeowner families are appreciating and thriving in their energy efficient, affordable homes close to transit and close to jobs. But unfortunately, since then, the application scoring elements favor rental developments even more. And despite building zero net energy and even transit-oriented developments, ownership projects just can't compete. We've really appreciated the opportunities to meet with staff and share input, and I'd like to respectfully raise two considerations related to density. One is ensuring alignment with local government density restrictions. In some cases, local jurisdictions don't allow the density required in the program guidelines. And then secondly, looking at comprehensive density measurements that include incorporating net density, subtracting sidewalks and common areas, and then also measuring for rooms and occupancy allowances versus just doors. We're grateful and encouraged by the conversation and discussion today, and we look forward to partnering. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Next, we have Nicole from the California Housing Partnership. Please go ahead, Nicole.
Good afternoon, council members, Chair Acefa, Vice Chair Ross, and Director Lynn Von Koch-Liebert. My name is Nicole Nerari. I'm the Central Coast Director with California Housing Partnership. Our area of expertise is sustainable, affordable housing finance and policy. I want to start by thanking the state for significantly stepping up its investment in affordable housing. But I do want to point out that Proposition 1 bond funds run out in 2022, and all other investments are one time. As of today, after 2022, there are no ongoing state loan programs for affordable housing other than AHSC. Even if other state programs are continued, none prioritizes TOD. And given that other programs often focus on homelessness or developing in the cheaper locations, it is not necessarily true that high GHG reduction projects are likely to be funded without AHSC support. We believe AHSC should keep its focus on immediate opportunities to reduce GHG equitably distributed in all regions of the state. We prefer building the GHG benefits of decarbonization into the GHG calculator in lieu of the current point system or an absolute mandate. In some cases, particularly when a second transformer is required, going all electric adds significant costs. There are also cases where it might not be practically infeasible. For example, making a project next to a Caltrain station on the peninsula all electric would have required a second transformer underground. Due to an underground creek on the property, the utility may not allow that. If projects like these that have many other GHG reduction benefits were subject to a decarbonization mandate, these projects might not apply to the program and would not receive the larger location-based GHG benefits. Regarding the DACs, we ask SGC to consider asking the legislator to amend the definition of disadvantaged community to include affordable housing serving lower income households in all locations. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nicole. Next, we have Bill Higgins from the California Association of Councils of Government. Bill, go ahead.
Good afternoon and welcome, Chair Acefa, to your first council meeting. I am from the California Association of Councils of Government, which represents most of the regional transportation planning agencies in the state and all 18 metropolitan planning organizations that implement SB 375. And I'm encouraging you, first I welcome the strategic look at AHSC, and I would encourage the council while they're looking to maybe implement a provision that has yet to be implemented in your statute, which is subdivision B of code section 75216, which says that MPOs and other regional agencies should identify and recommend projects within their respective jurisdictions for the program. SGC hasn't been able to figure out a good way to do that until now. And as proof, you can see that there is no points in the current 100-point system for that, despite it being in the statute. And if you look at the bottom of page 45 in your guidelines, you will see a nod to it, but with no weight or consideration given by SGC. I think that this is a great opportunity to build on your geographic equity issue because of the districts like Sandag that testified earlier. And we have, our MPOs have priority development areas and other things that could help you be more strategic or catalytic in your investments. And we would welcome an opportunity to sit down with your staff and figure out a great way to do that. The next agenda item will all be about building better partnerships between the states, regions, and locals. And I think building a partnership, a better partnership in this program would be a great step in that direction. Look forward to working with you. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. If there was anyone who wasn't able to fill out a comment card and wishes to comment on this item, please raise your hand now. Otherwise, our next comment will be from Richard Sadowski from Homefront EJ Morro Bay. Richard, please go ahead.
Thank you. Homefront EJ Morro Bay is pretty much made up of a bunch of older people that care about their community and are stewards in their community. One of the unique things about the climate change crisis, it affects all communities, and our community is kind of affected in a kind of a different, unique sort of way. Being a tourist town, there's and with an estuary, there's a lot of the development that comes in here is usually high density, has been high density, but it's, goes over to the Airbnb and vacation rental aspects, making the rents super expensive. And one of the things that I think that, the SGC should incorporate is the people that live here on fixed income and are citizen scientists that are working on climate change science and filling data gaps, making an opportunity for landlords and developers to help with incentives to have programs where people can rent and live here and do the work that's needed. Homefront EJ is a great supporter, a big supporter of decarbonizing California, and we feel that maybe having a program that it laces that together with new development and decarbonizing, but also making opportunities for affordable housing for people that are fixed income or very low income, and being able to live here and continue the work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. And with that, I will pass it back to Chair Acefa.
Great, thank you for the public for those comments. I think it's really helpful for staff, for us. I really appreciate some of the constructive solution-oriented recommendations as well. Again, staff, none of us have all the answers. I think it really takes a village to really address this issue. So recommendations around partnership, the MPOs and the local constituents know the issues at the ground better than any one of us who are dealing at the state level. So really appreciate that engagement. So that concludes that item. We now are moving on to item 8, which is a discussion item. And I would like to invite, again, Executive Director Ryan Koch, Senior Advisor for Economic Development and Transportation, Egon Terplan, and then Professor Elizabeth Deacon to present on this item.
Thank you, Chair Sefa. So in 2019, the legislature passed Assembly Bill 285, which was authored by Assembly Member Laura Friedman. And this bill tasked the Strategic Growth Council with producing a report on transportation planning and funding in California. So the report must include an assessment of relevant plans and funding programs that are outlined here on the slide, as well as provide recommendations for how we can improve our alignment of transportation funding programs with our long-term goals, including the goals of the California Transportation Plan. So really the big picture question is, how do our collective planning and funding activities support our long-term goals, including climate and equity goals? So at this point, I will pass it over to Egan Terplan, who will provide some context for this assessment.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Egon Terplan, Senior Advisor for Economic Development and Transportation, and just wanted to give a little context for how we approach the work that we took on. So I think, as you all know very well, we have ambitious climate commitments as a state that are really long-term and that are really driving us collectively towards carbon neutrality in the coming period of time. Next slide. But within our particular perspective on climate commitments, I think we also know that transportation in and of itself is the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions at 41%. And it's actually quite a bit higher when we add in some of the industrial emissions that are associated with the transportation sector. We're also well aware that tackling the transportation emissions on their own will require both changes in technology as well as changes overall in how we drive and how we get around. And that's consistent with the analysis that we've seen for quite a while from CARB and other sources. Next slide. But I think the reality that we're all recognizing and facing is that we're really not currently on track to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals, nor are we on track to meet some of the vehicle miles travel kind of goals and commitments we've collectively made and spoken about. So this sets up in some ways the urgency for us to act. This is a very important set of commitments we've talked about, and we heard in the beginning that we in the AB 285 process are looking at alignment with the California Transportation Plan goals, but the climate commitments really are one of the core ones we start with. So next slide. Given some of that urgency, given that broader context, we as the Strategic Growth Council hired a team to carry out the mandate of AB 285, the California Transportation Assessment. And that included hiring a team from University of California, and our soon to present Professor Deacon will share with us some of the initial findings of this work. But it is really important to note that it is a team that comes from multiple campuses across the University of California system. And so they've been hard at work over the recent months, doing analysis, doing a series of interviews, and producing a series of working papers. And so what you're going to hear today are some of those initial findings that come out of that work. I'm going to pass it back to Lynn for setting up the presentation.
Thank you, Egon. So before we get into the findings, just wanted to flag for everybody what the next steps of this process look like. So the team will use the remainder of November and December to revise the research papers and produce the draft report. And by the end of January, the Strategic Growth Council will submit a report to the legislature that is based on the research team's findings and the feedback that we've received. We really see this as the beginning of a larger conversation. And after submitting the report in January, we'd like to work with stakeholders and interagency partners to further develop recommendations and next steps informed by this important research. So we'll really look forward to hearing the council's direction on how to proceed. And next slide, please. So for members of the public, we invite you to share your questions and comments via this email, transportation@sgc.ca.gov, and just request that be received by December 1 so that we can really help inform the report to the legislature. At this point, we are going to play a pre-recorded video from Dr. Elizabeth Deacon, Professor Emerita of City and Regional Planning and Urban Design, who has been the principal investigator for this assessment. So we have the pre-recorded video of the findings, and then she will be with us here to answer questions and join in the discussion. So if we could go ahead and play that, thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Elizabeth Deacon, and I'm here to make a presentation of the findings from a study we've been doing with the Strategic Growth Council. This work represents work done at UC Berkeley, UCLA, and UC Davis as a partnership. Our research approach was to prepare 5 working papers. We had a relatively short time to put them together, as is shown in this outline. So luckily, I was able to get people with expertise at all 3 campuses to join me in working on this project. And today we're going to be presenting findings. Our final report will be submitted in December. Now, our first finding is that there's a gap between the climate-friendly state vision for transportation and the reality that investments at the state and regional level continue to emphasize automobility, and that has some consequences. I'm sure you know about AB 285. It not only calls for a review of transportation plans and programs at the state and metropolitan level, including their sustainable community strategies, but it also calls out several programs for special attention, and those are listed here. And to summarize some key findings, we found that the programs that are specifically called out in AB 285 represent about 2% of state transportation spending in the last couple of years, that a large state of the state, regional, local transportation expenditures are going to maintaining, rehabilitating, and operating our mature and extensive highway system. We're still adding highway capacity at the state, regional, and local levels. By highways, by the way, I mean streets and highways. And we're doing that to address congestion, safety, and goods movement concerns, while recognizing that this is likely to increase VMT, which may make it more complicated to achieve other goals like greenhouse gas reduction. We are also implementing projects for non-motorized transportation, like bicycle and pedestrian projects, but the money to do that is oversubscribed, and we're making commitments to expand transit service. And that's an important strategy in both the state and regional plans, but transit has struggled for some years, and it's been especially hard hit by COVID, and it faces funding shortfalls and maintenance needs of its own. So what got us to the place we're at, and what do we do about it? Well, another finding is that we have created an institutional structure for transportation in California that's more decentralized than in many other states across both agencies and levels of government. And it requires a high level of cooperation to reach decisions and to find funding for the projects that we want to proceed with. And this just shows some of the many organizations and levels of government that are involved in transportation in California. We have a large number of transportation organizations that address plans, and the plans shown here, this is taken from the California Transportation Plan for 2050, involves something like 4,000 pages of text, not including the MPO plans or the city and county plans, or even every one of the state plans. So it's a very complex and lengthy set of planning documents that we've created to try to deal with the situation. But that adds complexity, not just in terms of the sheer volume of plans that we've created, but also it makes it hard for many organizations and individuals to get their arms around it and understand what's being proposed. So the California Transportation Plan for 2050 addresses the 8 goals shown on this slide. And these are goals, some of which are long-standing goals, hundreds of year-old goals, like trying to invest in a transportation system that will support economic development and improve safety. And some are relatively recent, like trying to address climate. But the plan tries to address all of those goals. But the reality is that it can only shape a portion of the investment decisions, because so many decisions rest with local and regional authorities. The state and local funding programs that are used to back up those plans don't always address the key CTP goals, such as combating climate change or improving equity. And that's in part because the projects in those plans and the programs that in which they're embedded were conceived before these goals were given heavy emphasis. And here you see some of the issues that climate change and equity raise. Climate change and equity are interrelated because as climate change happens, the people who will suffer most are people of color and low-income people and the elderly and children. Another finding is that the MPOs, while they have made pretty amazing strides with their regional transportation plans in addressing issues of sustainable communities after the passage of SB 375, they really don't have much of a choice but to count on ambitious state and local action to achieve their goals, since they don't control many of the core components and assumptions either. And those include local transportation, spending, and land use, but both the state and the regional plans also depend very heavily on technology change, especially automation of vehicles and electrification of vehicles, and on telecommuting, and on investments in transit that might be hard to do. Most MPOs currently continue to devote the bulk of their spending toward auto investments. And you may say, well, how is it that I'm saying that they're putting much more emphasis on equity and greenhouse gas reduction, and their goals focus on accessibility, not just on mobility? Well, part of it is that a substantial amount of this money needs to be spent on maintaining the existing system that we already have. And so that's one reason why roads and public transit as well has required a lot of fix-it-first money, state of good repair money. That's one of the reasons why there's a lot of expenditure there. And another finding was that in reviewing the programs that were used to then begin to implement the RTP, there's a tendency to front load auto infrastructure and backload transit. And some of that has to do with the availability of funding and the way funds flow. For example, a lot of money for streets and highways comes from county transportation taxes. And they also provide money for transit, but it tends to be in smaller amounts. At all levels of government, spending in transportation tends to be additive, and that's without revisiting past commitments. Yet without considering these commitments, California is not going to meet its climate goals, certainly for 2030, 2035 period, and maybe other goals in the CTP also are not going to be attained. And this graph, which was produced by the Air Resources Board, shows that although the recession knocked down both greenhouse gases and VMT, the recovery from the recession showed both of those lines going back up. And we've got this classic J curve where a combination of population growth and economic growth, both of which are good things, are also leading us to have problems in actually reducing the total amount of VMT or greenhouse gases that are out there. And you can see that the greenhouse gas curve is lower, which is thanks to technology in newer vehicles coming on board. Our eighth finding is that existing funding programs do have flexibility to meet current policy priorities. And this strikes me as good news, and an important finding came from our legal team, who looked at the alternative ways that you might be able to achieve the goals that are set forward. And those could include alternative modes or new types of services, more of an emphasis on operations than on construction, using pricing to give price signals to get people to think about how they're traveling, prioritizing projects that meet policy goals for early action, providing matching funds to high priority projects, and maybe not matching the ones that are not as high priority or that might create conflicts. And I do want to raise the issue that was raised with us, which is there's also a concern that too much flexibility or not enough guidance can be a problem by not offering clear direction and may not lead us to meet all of our goals, because you can do practically anything if there's too much flexibility. And another issue, of course, is that if we've made promises, some may see changes as upending previous agreements and then undermining trust. And so that's something we want to be cognizant of as we talk about how to move forward. Good news is both the state and the MPOs are beginning to establish guidelines and use matching funds and programming authority to advance projects that help attain California's priorities. And both CAPTI, the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, and the Plan Bay Area 2050, both of which are relatively new products. CAPTI was released, I think, in February of this year, and the Plan for Bay Area was just approved a few days ago. And so we have these two documents that I think are well worth looking at carefully as potential models for the state. There's some other, what they do is they essentially say, here's how we're going to prioritize, with the funds that we do have some discretion over, how we spend those funds. And in the case of the Plan for Bay Area, there's also an elaborate evaluation system that basically flags projects that might create problems in goal attainment, and would not include those in programs unless they're modified. And then the state and regional agencies are all trying to work with project sponsors to modify their projects so they'll score well when evaluated against state, or I should say state or regional goals. And another thing that I think is promising is pilot projects to test new strategies, especially if they have a third-party evaluation, so that people can say, okay, it's fairly evaluated, not just by advocates, and here's what we found from it, whether it succeeded or didn't succeed, so we can learn something from it. And we're doing these things, and those are very positive steps forward. And the final thing I want to bring up is that the new federal infrastructure legislation, which just passed, is providing $550 billion in new spending. That's in addition to the spending we've been making over the next 5 years. And California, I think, is in line to get anywhere from 8% to 12% of that funding. Some of the programs will need more elaboration. And of course, this is an authorization, not an appropriation. So the exact numbers are to be determined. But additional federal funding could be really important, because in the past, the federal government has provided a shrinking share of the funding for transportation. And this opens up new possibilities to not only bring in federal funds for high priority projects, but also to use the funds that are freed up by those federal funds, use state funds to increase responsiveness to our own state priorities. So with that, I will say thank you for listening, and I hope I'll be able to join you for question and answer after I finish the talk that I'm giving elsewhere. Bye.
Thank you, Professor. And we are very pleased that that she is able to join us for the conversation, along with additional UCITS panelists, Amy Lee, Alyssa Barber, John Gabauer, and Katie Segal. And before I turn it back over to Chair Acefa, wanted to, again, similar to the last discussion item, tee up a couple of questions to help be able to facilitate the discussion. Again, with the intention of hearing from the council members and the public to then help guide the next steps that the SGC takes in being able to prepare the report for the legislature and move forward with this important topic. So the questions that we would like to pose for the council are: what are your reactions to and takeaways from the materials presented here? What long-term common goals should be prioritized in transportation decision-making, and how can we best advance those priorities? And what questions and needs does this report raise? After submitting the report to the legislature, what do you see as key next steps? So with that, I'll turn it over to Chair.
Great, thank you so much for that very thorough presentation. There is quite a lot there. Before I start council conversation, Emily, you want to?
Yeah, no, just thank you, Chair Sefa. Really quickly, again, thanks for bearing with me. This is the public comment process. Just an alert again, if you'd like to submit public comment, please complete our form at sgc.ca.gov/meetings. Listen for your name. We will go ahead and unmute your microphone at the end of the council conversation in just a bit. We are reserving our public comment period to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Great. With that, I will open it up for council discussion on what was presented before you. Specifically focusing on the 3 questions. Do we need that on the screen? But first, I think maybe just initial reaction from council members will be good. Then we could focus on the 3 questions and be able to provide direction to staff. That would be very, very helpful. We have Council Member Kanov.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation and for teeing up, I think, some good questions to help us sort through a lot of information. I want to thank UCITS for their work in providing these very informative findings. I think there is a lot to talk about here. It makes it clear that our transportation planning work and our investments are possibly not as nimble and coordinated as the current times call on us to be. CALSTA has been working towards trying to bring alignment with various state goals in our vast array of transportation funding and planning work through our Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure, or CAPTI. And one of the key components of CAPTI is an interdepartmental and interagency participation, as this job is bigger than just CALSTA and just bigger than just a transportation focus. As we heard in the report, it doesn't necessarily point at one particular party or problem. I think it makes it very clear that there are many different players involved and we need to work together. All of us in the transportation sector and our partners, we all have a role to play in incorporating these findings in our work and trying to help the state meet goals on climate, equity, and public health. So look forward to hearing additional comments and further conversation. And Secretary Kim and I are looking forward to working with the council and the stakeholders to turn these findings into further action and better align our work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And we have another hand. Is it Councilmember Shireen D'Souza on behalf of Secretary Blumenfeld, I would imagine? Yes.
Yes, that's right. Thanks so much, Chair, and congrats on your new role. And Secretary Blumenfeld unfortunately had to drop off the call a little bit early, and so he asked me to step in as his designee. I'm the Climate Deputy Secretary at Cali, PA. And the presentation makes clear, well, first, let me say thank you so much to the presenters for all of the work and research that went into bringing these reports together. The presentation makes clear that we're not going to be able to meet our climate goals without really aligning our transportation investments. And the California Climate Investments Program can serve as a good model for funding programs that both reduce greenhouse gas emissions and while also achieving other goals by using a suite of tools and resources that are really designed to inform program development and project selection. It's clear that going to all electric cars is not going to be enough. And to really achieve carbon neutrality, we need to pay serious attention to prioritizing investments in more sustainable transportation choices, such as public transit, walking, and cycling. In terms of process, CARB, the Air Resources Board, is working with several state agencies, including CALSTA, Caltrans, HCD, SGC, and OPR, to identify the high-level strategies needed to create more sustainable and equitable communities that reduce VMT and GHGs as part of the scoping plan update. And so CalEPA would really like to ensure strong collaboration between the 285 effort and the scoping plan process so that we reduce duplication and ensure our collective best thinking is happening in both contexts. And so we ask SGC to be sure to loop in CARB into any next steps related to the 285 report. In terms of future recommendations, we'd like to see emphasis on establishing strong policy signals to prioritize non-auto mobility modes for future transportation projects and updates to transportation plans, and deprioritizing or even eliminating capacity increasing projects in existing transportation plans. We really feel a need to create a strong signal for agencies at all levels of government to reconsider the pipeline of projects that were developed years ago and that are no longer aligned with the direction of travel that we're going in. We also want to see emphasis on funding for housing and transportation projects that reduce dependence on automobiles by investing in a range of travel options and building housing in infill areas that are closer to key destinations. And finally, a focus on accessibility to key destinations and VMT reduction as key metrics in our transportation funding programs. So those are just a few areas that we'd like to see focus on as we move forward. And again, thank you so much for all the work that has gone into this, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you, Undersecretary D'Souza. That context. Other feedbacks? I don't see a hand yet. Please use the raise hand tool if you want to line up to speak. Great. I have Deputy Director Starr.
Thank you. Yeah, that was an excellent presentation. I appreciate really the leadership of SGC and the work of UC ITS. Really just impressive body of work, thorough, amazing evaluation of our systems. A little bit depressing, but I don't think anything is surprising to all of us, and certainly lays out some work that we need to do. From a health perspective and health equity perspective, all of these things, as I think Shireen also just alluded to, they have health benefits, health co-benefits, reducing VMTs, reducing the auto mobility support that continues, and really refocusing on things that are going to ultimately reduce greenhouse gas reduction and bend that J-shaped curve back down again, and without the need for an economic recession to accomplish that. Things that are impacted by the transportation sector and health, include obvious things like traffic safety, physical activity, air quality, noise pollution, housing, food, medical care access, and work access, of course, employment. So we think that aligning state funding programs to achieve the goals that have been set out in the California Transportation Plan will allow us to achieve climate goals and also make progress toward health and equity goals. The other comment be about, I think there was a question about community engagement, but one suggestion we have is to incorporate transformative climate community program guidelines for community engagement into other state funding programs, just to ensure that underrepresented voices are part of the process, their needs are prioritized and addressed through the projects, and this would be no exception to that. And lastly, we'd recommend considering the use of public health and equity metrics and indicators when assessing and awarding state transportation investment dollars. I think this is already being done to some degree, and we are, of course, available to help with that. Thanks.
Muted. Thank you for that. I have next Secretary. I don't see Councilmember Capretz. You had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, first, obviously, I echo how hard it was to see when I first read that report. It was quite depressing. I'm sure, like many people, I've been experiencing climate grief in a way I never really expected to, because I mean, we have these kind of academic conversations, but the reality on the ground, I mean, people's lives are being impacted. So sometimes I feel removed in these conversations from how people are suffering. And so I feel an urgency to seeing data like that. That's hard to talk about in a rational, calm way, because we're not doing our job. I mean, I would say the state is not doing its job. And, I'm speaking from the community, that we feel let down. And, the conversation we just had in the last item about geographic diversity. I mean, I think this data makes a very compelling case about why you want to invest in different parts of the state. Because, I think, I've said this before, that not a lot of people from Sacramento live in the Bay Area. Like Southern California is a whole different arena. And we are suburban sprawl, car centric, freeway centric, air pollution, drowning in air pollution. And there's, I feel, lack of recognition of like understanding that investments to help us change that around, turn that around are, we're desperate for them because it's new to us. And so it's going to take, because there's been historic underinvestment in public transit and walking and cycling, it's going to take that much more for us to, turn the corner for public health and climate. And so I missed the slide on the recommendations. I'm the previous council member, I thought had some good ideas. So I support those, and I'm eager to hear more from SGC and other agencies about what the recommendations are. But my final comment is that, in San Diego, Hassan Escrata, I always, elevate him because he is somebody who is really leading the charge at our MPO in a way that I've been doing politics for 20 plus years, never thought would happen in Southern California. And he has, we're about to pass, our big regional plan in a few weeks. But he needs money. I mean, this is not going to happen unless we get resources and unless he's rewarded, unless San Diego's rewarded for sort of promoting infill in a way we never have historically. And that we are rewarded in terms of, we are not building new freeway and we're not expanding highways in this plan, which is totally different than our plan just 4 years ago. I mean, it's a dramatic change. So I know we are doing everything in our power to, just help the state reach these climate goals and obviously help all of us like live in a safe climate future. But I just kind of want to just put the human touch on this, that these are real people in real lives and people's health being impacted. And the state, like, there's just going to have to be just sort of getting out of our head and into our hearts about like why these changes needed, and the bully pulpit that's going to be needed around the state to get people to understand why these kind of changes are necessary. And it's not just this like top down, what I'm like, it's not somebody, the governor just saying, hey, you have to make these changes because I said so. It's because of all these other co-benefits. And so anyhow, it's a rambling answer, but I think I struggled with these slides. I found them very hard to digest. And this is the second time seeing them, and I found it just as hard this time. So I just want to put out there, that voice of people who are not in these roles, who are just wondering like, what are we doing and how are we ever gonna, get to a place where people feel like we're protecting their health and their future. So thanks. Oops, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Great. Anyone else? I'll jump in and reflect my sort of takeaway, just like everybody else. Obviously, from the first time I saw it, it was depressing and shocking a little bit, but at the same time, not, because we know this is a huge paradigm shift in this country. And I give credit to Costa, even COPTI documents around. I don't think any state agency in the country has something like that. We can debate about whether it has teeth or not. Done in itself is a big move. But within that context, the problems that we have around these issues, including what Nicole, you mentioned, sort of creating access for equity issues, but also reducing our greenhouse gas because as a significant amount of pollution comes from cars and how we drive. It demands a lot more bold and immediate action to do it. But we are faced with this huge behemoth of changing paradigms and cultures that have evolved over decades and decades. And it's, for the most part, unique to the American culture. I've lived and worked in some of the most progressive cities in the country. And the behavior and actions of those, including ourselves, are such that it is so embedded in that culture, and it's a very difficult paradigm shift to make. But again, I'm idealistic. If this body and this state cannot address that and do it, I don't think anyone else in this country can. I'm actually, in fact, delighted that the challenges are put forward in front of us through this study, and it behooves us, if we don't question some of the challenges that we haven't been able to address, and then figure out where we can be more effective in our either investments, including the interconnectedness of our discussions about housing, about greenhouse gas reduction in geographic areas. So it highlights all of that. From my sort of biased perspective, I very strongly believe good land use decisions are the best transportation policies. So I think we have to double down on those issues. At the end of the day, I believe transportation just follows where the land use is. If I want to, drive out 40 miles in the boonies and live there for health reasons or whatever, then the forces are that the transportation infrastructure and the highways and spread out into suburbia. And so this is a challenge that is before us. I think the staff has done a wonderful job in really synthesizing some of the analysis. I know I have a hand. I'll wait one more to hear before I sort of summarize in terms of direction to staff. But the way I see it is it's a wake-up call within this, and then we have to figure out what it is that we need to do. Where can we be effective? At one point, I actually thought about, oh my God, this is an attempt to repair an irreparable wound. And for me, the wound is that cultural addiction to the auto, and everything around us and everything that we do and the decisions we make are always revolve around that private auto ownership. So it just highlights that our work needs to be tenfold bold and or solution oriented to chip away some of this cultural norms in our state. So with that, I will ask Councilmember Flood. You had your hand up.
Yeah, hi there, and I kind of echoing what you just said, which is I see this as a call to action. It feels like I think we have to call you Hall of Famer now, Nicole Capretz. What you're saying is, if we don't act now, we're not doing our job. So I mean, I think we're past the point of denial, so to speak. Not that was a point, but I think it's a real opportunity to rally. And coming from local government, I'm a big believer that we need to double down our efforts at the local level. And if we're going to win the hearts, I think we've got minds at the state level. We're converting minds at the college level. I got 3 kids in college now, so that their minds are quickly being converted, and they're waking up to the realities of what we're talking about, and it's everything in between. And I think the local level can help, and I think we need to get the hearts of local electeds and local administrators to double down their efforts. And that's where land use is. Land use decisions are made at the local level. And as we've talked before, Sam, I think we need to double down our efforts on why we're doing what we're doing, and why this is important, and why this is an equity issue and a health issue, and why it does touch everyone. And this is not just sort of a clinical, which I really appreciate the presentation, and it wasn't just focused in on sort of the scientific analysis of greenhouse and carbon reduction, but it really got to the human side of it. So I try to always, in my job, quickly pivot and get to, okay, so now we know we need to change. And so how do we use this as an incentive or as motivation to change quicker and do more, do more better. And so that's what I see this as, is just a rallying point now to double down. That's it.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. So I'll try to wrap up and summarize what I've heard. And obviously the reaction is obvious from everybody. I think we're all being shocked, but I think there are some constructive sort of work to go forward for staff. Specifically, sort of question 3, the additional questions I think are for us to continue and explore what is missing. How do we link this to health issues and health equity, and how do we link this to some of the existing work that we have already, the transformative climate communities, the guidelines, recommendations around connecting them to those. I think this is true in the next couple of months, but also, post the submittal to the legislation. To me, the answer lies on some of the very bold policy decisions and legislations we already have in place. For example, OPR has a lot of sort of climate-related goal and charge, working with carbon, working with most of you to address that. How do we make the linkage between this report and some of the work that we're already doing around VMT, vehicles miles traveled reduction? How do we connect work that is already in our camps and then make the linkage so that we really understand that? So I think if staff could sort of look into that, what needs to be tweaked in the next couple of months before it goes to the legislators. But then I think most of the work is connecting the dots post submittal to the legislation. But to me, it does raise a lot of very fundamental but very important questions that we just can't avoid. So those are, I think, my summary for comments forward. I really thank you, Professor Deacon, for that analysis, and it was very helpful. And I thank staff as well for this incredible but very, very important work. So with that, we will move to public comments on this specific item. Emily?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Acefa. Again, I'm going to begin the public comment period by reading the names of everyone who signed up for this agenda item. Number 8, we have 4 people signed up to comment on the item. Again, when you hear your name, please raise your hand in Zoom. You can do this by clicking raise hand under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform. Or if you are joining by phone, please press *9. So we've received comment cards from the following individuals: Nicole Chang, Lisa Madsen, Bill Higgins, and Steve Bertelbaugh. You'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. If you're joining via the Zoom platform, you'll be able to see the timer on the screen. Otherwise, we'll notify you when your time is up. Please raise your hand if you have not yet done so. I will call your name and we will go ahead and unmute your microphone when it's time for you to speak. So first up, we have Nicole Chang from Climate Plan. Nicole, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity for public comment. I'm Nicole, a policy assistant with Climate Plan. We're a statewide network organization that focuses on issues that intersect transportation, such as land use planning and climate policy, and we look at it with an equitable lens. First, I want to thank you all so much for the work that the UC ITS research team has done for this report, and also for the SGC staff work on this report. We also appreciate being able to participate in this process. In terms of the findings, we agree that the Climate Action Plan for Transportation Infrastructure is a great example of alignment between our goals and investment, and we would like to see all relative agencies implementing it and continuing to implement it as soon as possible. We will be following up with a comment letter that will urge the Strategic Growth Council to make legislative recommendations that will streamline transportation decisions. And this is necessary to provide clarity on which transportation agency has what authority and clarify how the multiple transportation plans inform each other. Both the draft findings of this report and CARB's SB 150 report highlights transportation planning and funding decisions are hard to follow because of how many decision-making agencies are involved. And this makes it hard to establish climate and equity priorities and track if these priorities are being met. It would also be helpful to identify the statutes that distribute funding to programs that don't meet our climate goals. And again, I just wanted to say thank you for this opportunity to comment and for all your work.
Thank you very much. If we want to restart the timer, yeah, thank you. Next is Lisa Madsen from Sandig. Lisa, please go ahead.
Thank you. Sandig appreciates the work and findings of the SGC and the University of California Institute of Transportation Studies. Our region, like many others across the state, has ambitious regional GHG emissions reduction goals. We outline our approach to achieving these goals through our regional transportation plans and sustainable community strategies. We are excited for new funding opportunities that support climate adaptation and resiliency and believe regional planning agencies could play a larger role in the solution if given the funding and opportunity. Similar to what the state has done with the regional early action planning funds, we believe that greater efficiencies could be had within our region by granting resources directly to MPOs such as Sandag. Regional planning agencies already have high capacity to conduct regional planning. We often work closely with local governments and deploy grants strategically to meet shared regional goals. We are also well positioned as we work in partnership with local governments and stakeholders and can develop measurable goals and resources to meet local needs while ensuring individual investments and activities add up to regional resilience. It is our hope that as state funding programs are further developed, that it is structured to include granting funds to regional governments to support successful work for our regional climate adaptation and resilience. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Next, we have Bill Higgins. Bill, if you'd like to go ahead.
Good afternoon again. Speaking on behalf of the 18 MPOs, it'll probably be hard to contain what I have for 2 minutes. But first, let me just say that we share your goals. But I don't know that we've identified the problem correctly. And there's so many things to talk about in terms of, like, for example, the scoping plan has a 25% reduction target. And our SES targets are only 19% of that. There's an additional 6% that is amorphous that really there hasn't been an analysis done how to solve that. And that's supposed to be additional state actions. And that relates to our SESs, and yet there hasn't been an analysis done by state agencies on that side. There are also the CTP 2050 is an aspirational plan, which means it's not fiscally constrained. So it makes pricing assumptions in its scenario that an MPO cannot make, because if it did, it would be in violation of all the conformity rules. So for example, the scenario that the 2050 goal is on assumes 8 more SB1s in its pricing structure. Now, to get one SB1, it took 2 years of legislative effort, and we had to beat back an initiative. So we have some challenges. In fact, MTC's plan that was pointed in the document assumes multiple pricing strategies on all the main freeways in the Bay Area, which is going to require Caltrans support, which isn't in the CT plan because it's too new. And also we have to work together at FHWA. These are just some of the issues that we could talk about. What I would like to encourage this council to do is to invite a panel of MPO directors to your meeting, and we can sit down and have a real conversation about what their issues are and develop better partnerships around the REAP program and AHSC so that we can work together.
Great, thank you so much, Bill. Next, we're going to move to Steve Bertelbaugh. Steve from the Transportation and Land Use Coalition, please go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate this opportunity to address this very, very complex issue. The problem looking at it from the local government perspective is that they get directives like you need to reduce your vehicle miles traveled by 19% per capita over the next 50 years or 30 years. It's very difficult for a local policymaker to follow that kind of an instruction, particularly since they're dealing with plans that may take 13 years to implement. This all needs to be made understandable. And the most understandable thing that I can see is that people need to reduce driving at the rate of 1, 2, or 3% per year over the next dozen years. And if that becomes the objective, and it becomes an objective from top to bottom, then I think we can begin to see some progress. And I think we can see ourselves entering into the mid-range development on these projects that are 12 years in the pipeline. So thank you for your efforts. I hope we can get this done.
Thank you very much. That is it for public comment. I would note if folks have not had the opportunity to submit public comment for this item, please raise your hand now and we'll go ahead and unmute you. Otherwise, I will turn it back to Chair Acefa.
Great. Again, I'll say thank you to public comments as well. It's always informative and constructive. So a lot of comments around sort of the locals in some ways know better, but also their challenge and how we work with broadening our partnerships, NPOs, and local communities are sort of a critical part of not only this, but all of the important issues that we've discussed today. Thank you for those comments. Now we're coming to the last agenda item, which is item number 9. It's an action item. It is a consent calendar, which means it's consent. It's a routine action. It's non-controversial business. So the consent calendar is on approving the Sustainable Agriculture Lands Conservation, or SALC, Round 7 awards. So with that, I want to check if there are any questions from the council on the consent calendar. Seeing none, one more time, I'll ask Emily and public comments.
You got it. Thank you, Chair Acefa. So again, going to begin public comment period by reading the names of individuals who've submitted their comment for item number 9 on the agenda. We have 6 individuals who've signed up to comment on this item. Please go ahead and raise your hand. If you're joining us by Zoom, please use the raise hand function under the participants menu, which you can find at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, or by pressing *9 if you're joining by phone. So we have for this item, Tracy Ellison, Nancy Schaefer, Charlotte Mitchell, Nicole Van Vleck, Mark Del Piero, and Lisa Lindman. So you'll have 2 minutes to make your comment. If you're joining via the Zoom platform, again, we're going to have that timer up on the screen, or otherwise we will notify you when your time is up if you're joining by phone. So we will go ahead and hand it off to Tracy Ellison from the Solano Land Trust. Tracy, if you'd like to leave your public comment, thanks.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Terrific. Good afternoon, and council, thank you for this opportunity to say thank you. Solano Land Trust, my name is Tracy Ellison. I'm the Conservation Program Manager at Solano Land Trust. And we have been at the table day 1, round 1, having the opportunity to discuss these funds We've been fortunate to be in round 3, round 5, and now round 7 with projects for a total of 5 conservation easements, including today's. And so we're just here to say thank you for the continued opportunity, having the funding available. Each year I get up and speak in front of the council when we can, just to remind you that the work that the land trusts do and outreach to landowners, it's just not automatic. We build relationships. It takes time to have landowners make this decision about their land in perpetuity. So again, just very thankful for the time each year that this funding is available so that we can continue to inform our landowners. And when they're ready to make that decision, we're ready to move with the next round of funding. Additionally, we'd like to say from my land trust is the associated cost support that is worked into the program really has allowed us to build on staffing and build capacity. We're actually going to go from a 1, we've gone to a 2-person, we're going to go to a 3-person team. And it's really based on our consideration of having projects that are funded through this program and having that associated cost opportunity. So once again, we have a 300-acre piece in here today, the Gates Wolf Ranch. If you're familiar with past projects, but this will be adjacent to the Brazelton Ranch, which in total will have, including another conservation easement, 4,400 acres of connected wildlife and agricultural lands outside of the city of Vacaville. So we thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy, and thank you for all the good work you do. Next, we're going to have Nancy Schaefer from the California Rangeland Trust. Nancy, please go ahead. Again, just a reminder to folks who are joining by phone, make sure to press *9 to unmute yourself, or if you're joining by Zoom, make sure to raise your hand so that we can go ahead and unmute you. Okay, we can come back to Nancy, no worries. So next on our list, we have Charlotte Mitchell. Charlotte, if you'd like to go ahead and give your public comment now. Okay, we will go ahead and then move to Nicole Van Vleck from the Montna Farm Sutter Buttes Regional Land Trust. Nicole, if you'd like to go ahead and leave your public comment now.
Yes, Emily, can you hear me?
We can. Yeah. Hi, Nicole. Thanks. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to, I'm Nicole Montna Van Vleck, and I'm representing the owners today, and I'm one of them for the Magnolia Ranch project. And our representative is also here from our land trust. So I'm just going to really keep this brief and just wanted to thank the staff for all their time and energy towards reviewing this project and the recommendation for the project. I represent a group of landowners that's very committed to conservation on other projects, and we'd really, really hope to see this one be protected in perpetuity as an agricultural operation. Just wanted to thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Mark Del Piero from the Ag Land Trust of Monterey County. Mark, if you'd like to go ahead and leave your public comment now, we'll go ahead and unmute you. Okay. Last on our list, we have Lisa Lindman from the Sutter Buttes Regional Land Trust. Lisa, if you'd like to provide your public comment now, we'll go ahead and unmute you.
All right, thank you, Emily. I appreciate it. I just want to take a moment to thank the council as well as DOC staff for all their efforts to review and approve the Round 7 awards. And I represent the Sutter Buttes Regional Land Trust, and we are working with the Magnolia Ranch landowners. And I also want to mention the SOF program is a critical funding source, and we could not engage in this important conservation work that we do without your support. And we are incredibly grateful for the SOF program, and more specifically, being able to protect Magnolia Ranch, which will protect 952 acres of farmland and habitat that will not only benefit our rural community in Yuba County, but it also helps protect our local military installation, Beale Air Force Base, from encroachment. So this project has a lot of really significant benefits for our area, and we're so excited to have this opportunity to turn a project that would have been a potential development project into something more meaningful as a conserved property that will be protected into perpetuity. So we really thank you for making this funding available, and for all the staff efforts that go into reviewing these projects, and for the council as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. I would give one more opportunity to Charlotte. Charlotte, if you are on the line, Charlotte Mitchell from the California Land Trust. If you're on the line, we'd love to unmute you and have you leave your public comment.
I'm just doing an audio check. Can you hear me?
Yep, we got you now. Please go ahead.
Very good. Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to join you today. My name is Charlotte Mitchell. I'm with the California Farmland Trust. CFT has been an active practitioner of the SALT program funds, and we appreciate working on behalf of willing landowners to administer these funds and ultimately protect the most valuable farmlands in California. We encourage the council's continued leadership on this program and remain vigilant to the most pressing task of protecting those working landscapes for its invaluable contribution to our state's economy, our climate resiliency, food security, and our local food supply. We are proud to offer to you today 2 applications for your consideration and appreciate your commitment to this program. Lastly, I also want to remind you of your invitation that we sent out to you here recently to celebrate with us next month on projects that we use these funds for that have recently closed. Thank you again, and I appreciate your consideration of today's program.
Thanks, Charlotte. I'm glad we were able to hear from you. Next, we have Kane Sylvie from the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County. Kane, if you'd like to go ahead and leave your public comment, we'll go ahead and unmute you now.
Hi, thanks, Emily. My name is Kane Sylvie, representing the Land Conservancy of San Luis Obispo County. And I just wanted to say thank you to all the SALC staff. The SALC program has been a fantastic partner for us in the past, and continues to be in our work here in San Luis Obispo County. And we're very grateful to be under consideration for a conservation easement on the Warren Ranch property here in SLO County. So yeah, thank you all for working with us through this process, and we look forward to working with the SALC program in the future.
Thank you, Kane. We will go ahead and ask folks, anyone who hasn't had the opportunity to speak yet on this item, to please go ahead and raise their hands. You can do so by clicking the functionality on Zoom under the participant form, or if you're joined by phone, please press *9. I'm going to just do one last scan to make sure we haven't missed anyone. It does not look like it. All right. Chair Acefa, I will pass it back to you. Thank you so much.
Great, and congratulations to the awardees. Again, here's another incredible program that this body administers. It's very exciting. So with that, I would ask council members for a motion and a second to approve the recommendations in the consent calendar.
I'll make a motion that we accept the recommendations on the consent calendar. Karen
I'm going to
Ross.
jump in. There is, I apologize, there's one more public commenter that we had some technical difficulties with. I'm just going to kick this back to Emily for Sherwood.
Absolutely. I think we got the name wrong on the Google form, so thanks for catching that, Matt. If you'd like to go ahead, Bob, we'll let you leave your public comment now. Thank you.
This is Mark Del Piero. I'm the managing director for the Ag Land Trust in Monterey County. Can everyone hear me now? Finally?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
Good. The name was correct, but the laptops were different. I apologize for that. Mr. Chairman and members of the council, I wanted to get on and give you the opportunity to ask us any questions if you might have any in regards to the proposals. First of all, we'd like to express our deepest appreciation to Virginia Jameson and the staff from the Department of Conservation for all of the consideration and kindness they've extended to us. We obviously are deeply appreciative of their recommendations, so that the members of the council have an appreciation for what the staff proposals will lead to in Monterey County. We've got 3 different proposals. One of them will not only preserve prime farmland at the Leonardini Ranch, but that ranch also contains existing habitat for California sea otters. Additionally, I think it's appropriate to point out that the Leonardini River Ranch and 3 of the other projects, 3 of the other ranches that are included in the 2 other applications include not only all 100% prime farmland, but they also abut the Salinas River, which is now habitat for the endangered southern steelhead. So it's important for the council members to understand that the decisions you all are making today are not only unbelievably important and policy changing in terms of the preservation of prime farmland, but they're also, those decisions are going to be tremendously beneficial in terms of habitat and endangered species protection. And so if you all have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. The Ag Land Trust was organized in 1984, and I've only been on the board since 1984. So I know a little bit about what's transpired in our nonprofit organization over the course of the last 4 decades.
Thank you so much. And thanks for all the work you do. It looks like we actually have 2 more folks who'd like to leave public comments. So I would pass it over to Bob Slow.
Slowby. Yes.
Slowby. Sorry for that.
It's like slob and an E. But so I think Nancy was not on the line, but I'm in the mix with 7,500 acres of land that our family has owned since 1908, west of Williams. And we're honored to be part of this, and very much hope that we can preserve this working landscape in perpetuity, because we believe in rangeland and habitat conservation, and have spent most of a lifetime doing that good work. And so now everyone will be able to enjoy it, so forever.
Great. Thank you so much, Bob. Appreciate it. And I believe that's it for our public comment for this agenda item. Chair Sefa, passing it back to you.
Great, thank you. We have a motion by Secretary Ross to approve the recommendations. Is there a second?
Second.
Now we have move and was seconded. So Matt, take it away.
Yes, Director Sefa.
Yes.
Shereen D'Souza on behalf of Secretary Blumenfeld.
Yes.
Nicole Capretz.
Yes.
Sasha Kurgan on behalf of Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez. We can come back. Deputy Director Starr.
Yes.
Mike Flagg.
Yes.
Undersecretary Alyssa Conovan.
Yes.
And we'll go back to Sasha Kurgan on behalf of Secretary Lourdes Castro Ramirez. And Secretary Ross?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes.
Great. And thank you again, SGC staff, for this great work. So now we have our council will now take public comments on matters not on the agenda. I just want to let the public know that unfortunately, this is not a forum for dialogue with the council members. Questions posed by the public during this item cannot be substantively addressed or discussed at this meeting, but any required follow-up can be directed by the executive director and connect you to the relevant staff. So with that, I'm going to ask Emily to conduct again our public comments session.
Great, thank you so much. So we are monitoring our attendees in our chat here. So for folks who are interested in leaving a public comment for any items other than those on the agenda today, this is your opportunity. So again, if you would like to raise your hand, you can do so by clicking raise hand under the participants menu if you're joining us by Zoom, or by pressing *9 if you're joining by phone. So it looks like we have one raised hand from Richard E.T. Sadowski. Richard, we're going to go ahead and put that 2 minutes up on the screen if you'd like to go ahead and leave public comment.
Thank you. A great meeting, and really appreciate the fact that we're able to public comment here. I just wanted to say that this last weekend we had a celebration of life memorial for a really dear friend of mine, Fred Collins, who is the Northern Chumash Tribal Council Administrator, and who several years ago led the idea of a Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. And NOAA had moved this sanctuary project forward on November 9th. And, you know, unfortunately, Fred wasn't able to witness the movement forward. However, I just wanted to share with all you that one of the things that Fred brought to the table is a sense he was a catalyst of collaboration. People from all faiths, all races, all cultures were welcomed, and then we came together in a dialogue with each other and brought a project together. And I just wanted to say that, you know, this is a good example of a collaborative effort, not only to decarbonize California, but also bring meaningful dialogue to the First Peoples who we could learn from, and bringing in, one of the things Fred has done too is getting the scientific community to engage with the culture of what the Chumash stood for and stand for, with the relationship of the land. And once again, I'm really encouraged by, you know, by the team that Governor Newsom has put together, and appreciate you guys, and thank you again.
Thank you so much, Richard. I believe that is it for public comment. We have no other raised hands in the attendees section. Back to you, Chair Sefa.
Great, thank you again for that comment, Richard, and for sharing that story. And sorry about your loss. Fred sounds like was a great human being. So with that, that brings us to a meeting adjournment. I think, I'm sorry that we went about 30 minutes over, but I think it was worthwhile. I was very delighted in terms of the structure that was put forward, and I commend Lynn again. Discussed this early when she was thinking about this. It is really wonderful to see it at work, and obviously we'll continue in this format. Engaging the council in this very substantive discussion is a worthwhile time to spend here. Very expensive meeting here, so this is worthwhile because it will definitely set us up for the work ahead. The big challenges that we just touched the surface today was just a couple of very meaty discussions around policy issues. So I'm really delighted. I'm going to take credit for it because it happened just when I started. So I'm just going to take credit for that. But I want to thank council members as well for really engaging in this conversation. And I look forward to more of this. So with that, I would say we are adjourned and you can go back home.
Thank you.
Great.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Thank you.